Hello and welcome to Wingin It, and welcome to a new video here. Today we are going to be taking a look at doing an Oceania tier list. So we're going to be going through each of the 95 birds in Wingspan's Oceania expansion and putting them on a tier list for their early game usefulness. Now, some of you might have seen I've done a couple of these tier lists in the past, both for the base game, of course, and then the European expansion. Those were done with the help of Tay-Ray over on his channel, Tuck and Cash. If you haven't seen those videos already, I suggest you do. I'll link to those in the description. But here we're going to be following a similar process. Like I say, we're going to be ranking them for their early game usefulness and also thinking about 1v1 competitive play. So just have that in mind as we go through each of the birds here. Now, as I say, with the previous tier lists, it wasn't just me, it was with the help of Tay-Ray from Tuck and Cash, and it wouldn't be a tier list if I was doing this on my own. So I am very pleased to say I'm joined here by Tay-Ray himself. He's joining me to do this tier list. How are you doing today, Tay?
Hello there. I am doing very well. It has really been a while since I'm on the channel, so I'm really excited to be here, no less to talk about these very important topics. I'm sure many people have been waiting for this video for a while, so happy to be here.
Absolutely, yeah. I know this has been one of the most requested things, and it's been put off and it's been put off for the longest time. But obviously Asia expansion is not far away, so we've got to do this before we get our hands on that new expansion, and then, yeah, who knows, people can start asking us to do that tier list instead. But yeah, very happy to have you here, as I say, to go through this tier list. Now, the idea here is that this is going to be on a similar basis to the previous one. So we have got the 6 tiers here. We've got S, A, B, C, D, and F, where obviously S is going to be the strongest birds, the ones that you most want to look out for in your starting hands in the early game, all the way down to F being the least useful. But we've got a slightly different twist on it this time around, where each of the tiers have sort of got their own name that we are giving them. So starting off with S tier, S in this case stands for supreme. So these are going to be the best birds, the ones that 99% of the time, maybe even 100% of the time, you would want to be keeping those in your starting hand because they're just so powerful, and you're always really going to want those in the starting hand. Going on next to A tier. A in this case stands for always great. So again, maybe not quite on the level of the S tier birds, but still, you're always going to want to see these. And most of the time, they're going to be great picks, great birds for you to either pick up from the tray, find from the deck, or obviously keep in your starting hand. Next up, we've got B tier. And B here stands for two slightly different things. In the first instance, is below A. So these are the birds which didn't quite make it for A tier. They're not quite as good, but they are still really good birds that you want to see, again, in the early game, but just slightly below that A tier. And then we're also going to have some birds that go in here which are better in multiplayer games. So you'll see as we come on to some of these birds, but there are plenty of birds in Oceania which behave slightly differently in a 1v1 game versus multiplayer formats, and it's worth having that distinction in mind. Next up for C tier, again, we've got two different sorts of birds that might go in here. We've got the cheap filler birds, and we've got the birds that can work sometimes. So again, these are birds that step below B, where you're really not going to look for these in all situations, but in a pinch, these can work. These can help fill out the board. Might be something that you would look to keep in a starting hand. Next, we've got D tier. And again here, D standing for two different things. It's either a desperation play or something that you just don't want early. So we all know those birds. We've talked about them on previous tier lists that you might want at some point in the game, but not really early on. They're not really a starting hand birds that you'd look to play and help develop your board and increase your tempo and all that good stuff. But it might be something that you might still keep if you can afford to. So those sorts of birds will go in here. And then, of course, those desperation plays where it's a really bad starting hand, but you just need something either from the tray or from your hand to play and just get something going. And then last, of course, we've got F tier, and F in this case stands for forget it. So these are birds that really, in most situations, you really shouldn't be keeping from a starting hand or looking to pick up and play from either the deck or the tray. These are just birds that, yeah, either they're so useless in general or just really birds you should look to play later on. So those are our 6 tiers. And as I say, those are the sorts of things that you should be keeping in mind when we go through and rank these birds. And so with that out of the way, we've got 95 birds to get through, Tay. So I think we should go ahead and make a start. So we begin here with our first bird going through in alphabetical order. We've got Abbott's Booby. And so this is a bonus card gaining bird, slightly different to the ones that we know from base game and European expansion. You get to draw 3 bonus cards and then discard 2. But you can also discard bonus cards that you didn't draw on this turn. So a little bit of a twist on the traditional bonus card power, which is interesting. However, not really something you look for in the early game. So I've put this in D tier, in the sort of, maybe it's a desperation play sometimes, but in general, you kind of don't want it early. It's kind of one of those later game birds. So that's where I've got it. What are your thoughts, Tay?
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree with D tier. I guess it's worth mentioning that, right, in Oceania, you're starting with 1 extra nectar. So that really enable, us to play birds that, consume 2 of the same food. If this were in the base game, it probably will be in the F tier. But because of the nectar, now it's worthy of kind of desperation play.
Absolutely. And yeah, I think that point may come up quite a few times. So we're obviously in this situation where we are looking at the Oceania birds. We're assuming it's going to be, you're playing on the Oceania boards. You've got that starting nectar as well. So with all of that in mind, yeah, that is definitely going to change potentially how some of these birds, like you say, might have been ranked if they were in the base game or in an earlier expansion. But yeah, D tier here for the Abbott's Booby. So, all right, moving on to our next bird here, we've got the Australasian Pipit. Now, this is a game end power. So at game end, you tuck a card from the deck behind each bird in your grasslands. So what are your thoughts on this bird, Tay, for the early game?
Yeah, I mean, I hope I'm not starting this video off with a take too soon, but my first instinct is F. I mean, just because, it's a bird that you want to play as late as possible. And, in terms of point that you potentially get for 2 food, it's just not that great. So I'm thinking F tier.
Yeah, I've got it in F tier as well. And I think
we
might see this for quite a few of these sort of game end powers, but we'll see as we go through the list. But yeah, obviously the new power color, the yellow power is introduced in Oceania. Like you say, you only actually get any sort of benefit from those at the end of the game. So if we're looking for early game, we're looking for birds that are going to get us some kind of benefit right off the bat. Yeah, this is not really the kind of bird that I think you really keep in a starting hand. Right. I look to play that early on. So I've also got an F tier, I think. Yeah, maybe not such a good start, but hopefully it's self-explanatory there. Moving on to our next bird, we've got our first brown power, which might be looking on the up here. We've got the Australasian Shoveler. And so this is one where when activated, you choose 1 other player and you both draw a card from the deck. Now, I have put this in B tier and I've got it in there for the reason of being better in the multiplayer. So I think this is the first of quite a few examples we'll see where actually in 1 versus 1 games, these are okay and these can work and you can still get some good usage, but really they shine the more players you have in the game. Obviously, choosing just 1 other player, so you can potentially activate this a few times, choose different players and really spread that benefit out, or pick the player who you think would benefit from it at least. So B tier for me. Do you agree with that, Tay?
Yeah, I think if it totally fit in B tier, maybe lower in the B tier for me, but we'll see as the tier list develop.
Absolutely. Yeah, as you say, I think these are going to build up these tiers, each of them, so we'll kind of have a bit of an idea in some cases of whether a bird is kind of higher in a tier or lower in a tier and how they sort of fit in with that. So we'll kind of see, yeah, as this tier list is fleshed out, how that's going to go. So B tier, hopefully straightforward for that one. Next bird up, we've got the Australian Ibis. So this is another brown power. This is when activated, you shuffle the discard pile, draw 2 cards, and then you choose 1 card, and then you either tuck it behind the Ibis or you add it to your hand. So interesting power. Which tier have you got it in, Tay?
Okay, well, this is quite expensive for early game for the power. I think I'm really between C or D and really leaning towards D just because in early game, right, there's not that many cards in the discard. So it might be hard to get good card from that. So yeah, I'm leaning towards D tier here.
Interesting. Well, I was sort of the other direction. I was sort of somewhere maybe around B tier. I was thinking for this. I think.
Oh wow. Okay.
Maybe between B and C. I think it's definitely not in that A tier of being sort of always a bird that you look to keep. And it's definitely expensive, but I think it's quite flexible on the food cost. Obviously, with the wild food cost and. It's a guaranteed point every time. That's how I think about this. So if you're, going to play this in your wetlands and maybe start drawing some cards, you're guaranteed a point every time. And if it's not a point, it's because you found a bird that's so amazing that you want to play that actually you're quite happy to get that instead of a point. So I think this is a bird that I look to keep more often than not in a starting hand if I'm going for, to try and get something in the wetlands. So if you're sort of between C and D and I'm sort of between B and C, does that mean it belongs in C tier?
I think that can work. I think one point that you brought up that's quite interesting as well for the ibis, when I think about it, I also lean towards playing it in the wetland more than the grassland. That could be kind of against the convention in the base game where, you might think about like gaining card in the grassland is good, but with this power, it's better in the wetland. What do you think?
Yeah, I think it's a tricky one. It definitely can work in the grasslands. I think you kind of need something else. I don't think this works as a sole card source in the grasslands because, let's be honest, most of the cards in the discard pile, they're there for a reason. People have discarded them because they're not very good. But if you can get a sort of tuck and draw bird or some other kind of card source to go along with the ibis, then it can work just as a way of gaining some cards and then maybe cycling those for others. So I think I generally look to play it more in the wetlands, I think, than in the grasses. But you have got that flexibility where sometimes it can kind of work in either habitat. So I think, are we happy with C then as the sort of, it can work sometimes, but it's not really something you generally look for all the time?
Yeah, I'm happy with that.
Excellent. All right. Well, we're sort of very even split. So, are we going to get an A tier anytime soon? Maybe on our next bird, we'll see. Well, the next one is Australian Magpie. So we've got another game in power here. This one, very, very different to any other kind of power. So you discarded one egg from each bird in this row and column that has an egg on it. And then you get to cash 2 grains from the supply for each egg that you discard. So again, another one of these game end powers, and I think for the same kind of reason as the previous game end power that we looked at in the Pipit, I've got this one in F tier. Really, to be honest, not a bird that I ever look to play at any point during the game, let alone at the start of the game when it's so expensive, it's going to cost all of this food and it just goes in the grasses and doesn't do anything for you. So hopefully a straightforward F. Is that, am I right in saying that, Tay?
Yeah. Absolutely F tier. Like I wouldn't go as far as saying like even in late game the point earning potential is so low for this bird. It's just all around not a great bird.
No, it's definitely not, like I say, really a bird that ever I would look to play, and certainly when trying to sort of get a bit of tempo, get something good going down early. This is almost never a bird that you should be looking to keep in a starting hand. So straightforward, hopefully that one. We'll move on next to our first pink power. So here we've got the Australian Owlet Nightjar. So this one, when another player takes the game food action, you gain a worm from the bird feeder, if there is one, at the end of their turn. So where have you got this one, Tay? What are your thoughts?
I mean, it's one food and multi-habitat, and the pink power that allow you to gain food. I think it's at least an A tier for me. I just feel like once you have this down in early game, it just kind of pay for itself and generate a lot of food throughout the game. So I really like it.
Interesting. Well, I've got this in B tier on the basis of, again, kind of a bit like the shoveler, but that sort of it being better in a multiplayer. I think, it is the kind of bird where in a 1v1, in the right situation, if you're up against someone who's clearly going for a forest engine, and you're going to get food from this every time, it can definitely be strong. And like you say, I think that cheap food cost and the flexible habitat is definitely nice. But I don't think it's really a bird that I always look to keep. I think I'd rather sort of find some other food source that I know I can more reliably get food, and more importantly get some nectar, because the worms are useful, but if you're playing Oceania, you want to get as much nectar as you can and try and spend that instead of just the regular food. So yeah, I've got it in B tier. Are you willing to bring it down from A?
I mean, yeah, actually, like a high B would be fine for me now. Like, let's see what else
we can see.
Maybe we'll get a bump later.
Yeah, I'll put it above the shoveler for now. But like you said, we can always see as that goes. But yeah, definitely a nice cheap bird that can definitely be a good one to get early on. So, all right, we go to our next bird. It's another yellow power. We're getting lots of these coming up. We've got the Australian raven this time. So at game and cash up to 5 food from your supply on this bird. So yeah, I think again, sort of a running theme here maybe for some of these game powers. I think this really is for me F tier, maybe slightly above these other two, but just not really something that you'd look to keep too early on. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I mean, I think it's still in the F tier, but on average, I think this is a better game and power than what we have seen so far. So,
Yeah, it's at least one that if I did pick it up, at some point in the mid game, I'd consider playing it if it can fit in with the other things I'm doing. But it's just, really not one that you'd look to keep or play early. It's so expensive, and it's a nice point bomb, but I think like we're going to see with quite a few of these sort of bigger point birds, that you might really like to play at the end of the game, actually. As we've sort of talked in the previous tier lists, those bonus card birds, those big point birds, just not really the birds that you look for in the early game. So another F tier was a very, very bottom heavy start to this tier list. We'll see if that's going to change as we move on to our next bird. We've got the Australian reed warbler. So this is a double bird. You get to play another bird in your wetlands, pay its normal cost, but you get a 1 egg discount. So is that going to sway how you're going to rank this bird, Tay-Ray?
Yeah, I mean, this power is interesting, right? Basically, it allows you to play 2 birds in the wetland in early game without laying eggs. But really the question is like, do you want to do that on the Oceania board? Because of the placement of different reroll that's allowed on the board. So I think for me is maybe in the C tier. Like if I have extra card that I can keep, I'll keep it. And then maybe help me to win end of round, I'm more inclined to play it. But yeah, no better than C tier, I would say.
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of between probably D and F, to be honest, for this one. I think
I
think it's like you say, on the surface, it sounds appealing. And I think it's the kind of bird where actually, if you were playing with this on the baseboards, it probably could be in C tier, maybe even the upper end of C tier, because you're pushing your wetlands out immediately to get the 2 card production. But actually on the Oceania boards, you already get that by playing 1 bird. And like you say, you sort of give up the opportunity of maybe spending a food and resetting the tray, which can actually be quite useful sometimes. So I think this is kind of one where even if I did have it at the start, and even if I could potentially double play with it into something else, I might not want to do that, and I might rather wait until a little bit later. So I think it, like I say, sort of falls for me in that I don't want it early category, and so maybe goes into D tier. So are we happy? Are we happy with that? We'll put it next to the booby for now.
Yeah. That sounds good.
Let's see where we go later. All right. Very good. Move on to our next bird. We've got the Australian shell duck here. So it's a brown power. When activated, draw 1 face-up card from the tray that has a cavity or a star nest. You may reset or refill the tray before doing so. Now, this is kind of an interesting power. It's obviously a brown power in the wetlands, which we all like, and drawing extra cards. It's not really a power I like, though, to be honest. There's a few of these, and we'll sort of come onto them as we get through this. So I've got this in C tier. I think it can work sometimes, but it's not a bird I look to go for too often, because more often than not, if you're using that power, you're going to be resetting the tray. There's not always going to be that right nest type for you to be able to pick up. And more often than not, if you're resetting that tray, you're going to reveal something good, as we all know, that you then can't pick up, and your opponent in this case is then going to go and grab that. So it's a very high risk bird, and I try and stay away from them. I'd almost, in some cases, rather have no wetland bird than have this. But if you need something, I think it can sometimes work. So C tier for me. What are your thoughts, Tere?
Yeah, I think I'll put it in C tier. I mean, I wouldn't go as far as saying like, avoiding this. If that's my only wetland bird, I would still play it. Yeah, the power is definitely one that, before I get into Oceania, I thought the power looks really good because you get to reset the tray. But then, like you say, more often than not, you just end up revealing card for your opponent. So definitely got burned quite a few times. So C tier it is.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think to be fair, there's quite a lot of birds like that in Oceania where maybe on first viewing, I would have put it in a certain tier. And then after playing with it a few times, I either realized it was either much better than I thought or much worse, and that's just where that experience playing comes into it. And you kind of don't always know until you've really tried and experienced that kind of bird. So yeah, definitely been burned far too many times for my liking by this one, and it's definitely put me off playing it. So we got it in C tier. I think that sounds about right. So next bird on our list, we've got another brown power coming up. We've got the Australian zebrafinch. This one, when activated, if the player to your right has a seed in their personal supply, you tuck a card from the deck behind this bird. So thoughts on that one, Tere?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I just don't remember if I've even played this bird before, or maybe played once or twice. Just kind of tell you like how much I value the power. I mean, 1 point for 1 foot is really low. I mean, you do get Star Nest, but that's about all that it got going. So I want to say F. Like, I'm willing to compromise with D, but definitely no higher than D.
Well, you're in luck because I've also got it in F. So it feels like you say quite straightforward, and trying to sort of rack my brains of when have I ever kept this bird early on or even considered playing it, because it's just 1 point and it's a really weak brown power. Because again, if we're talking about Oceania, most of the time you're actually not going to have seeds because you're going to be taking that as nectar if you can, if you're gaining food from the bird feeder or elsewhere. So it's so easy for other players to block this, and I think even if it was guaranteed point every time, I still wouldn't really look at this as too good of a bird, because grasslands is just generally not really the way to go. So I think maybe we'll put it slightly above some of these other game powers, because maybe it's going to be useful. But yeah, I think in general, one to forget, I think, when you're looking for early games. So F tier definitely filling out as we go through this list. We'll go on to our next, but we've got another brown power. Lots of these coming up. We've got the black noddy here. This one, when activated, you reset the bird feeder, gain all the fish if there are any, and then you can discard any of those fish to tuck that many cards from the deck behind this bird. So it's big, expensive cost, big point bird, but it has got a nice brown power, which might change things. So I've kind of tentatively got this in C tier. I really didn't know how to rank this one. I found this quite tricky because I've definitely had games where I have kept this at the start and it's worked really well as this kind of start to the wetlands engine. Like I say, that big point bird, get something going, get a good brown power that, sometimes actually you can keep the fish and then play some more wetland birds and it can help tempo. But 3 fish being the food cost, it can so often be off-putting that, depending on how the bird feeder's looking or depending on your other plans for round 1, sometimes it's just not going to work. So, I think on its day, it could be a B tier. In a lot of cases, it's probably more like a D. Oh, wow. So I split the difference and went with C, but what do you think?
I'm definitely leaning towards D tier just because of the food cost, right? You're going to consume like 3 food right at the beginning of the game for power that, like you say, sometimes you may gain some fish for points or get the fish back to play. But again, it's just not something that I look forward to play. It's more like a desperation. Like that's the only wetland card that I drew or I have. Yeah, I think that's fair. It's never really one that you're super excited to get in a starting hand. I think often this is one where actually
maybe once you've already got something in the wetlands that you're kind of looking to build a bit of an engine that actually you can add this to, and maybe in sort of, towards the end of round 1 into round 2, like you say, the food cost is just so off-putting that you do kind of need to have some sort of food generation to make sure you can afford this. So I think I can get on board with D tier, but I'd certainly like to put it above Abbott's Booby as actually, being a brown power that you can definitely get some usage out of. So all right, D tier for the Black Noddy. We go on here to the Black Swan next. So got another game in power here, yellow power. Lay 1 egg on each of your birds with a wingspan over 100 centimeters, including this one. So yeah, really getting through these game end powers. Where have you put this one, Taylor?
Yeah, I think the Swan is more or less in the same tier as Australian Raven. It's like the food is easy to play, but you don't want to play it early in the game. But more likely than not, it has some better end game earning, like point earning potential. So still F tier, but around the Raven.
Yeah, I think it's similar. I think, there's part of me that was thinking maybe this could go in the bottom of D tier as that sort of desperation play, because the food cost is quite flexible, and if you've got no other wetland birds, it's actually not terrible, and you do know you're going to get some points from it later. But it is, again, just that game end aspect where you're actually not going to get anything from it until the end of the game. But yeah, I think I do like this slightly better than the Raven, because you're guaranteed to get at least 1 egg off it, and if you can sort of synergize the rest of your strategy to get other birds down that are going to fit that, it can work well. But yeah, I think F tier for that kind of bird makes a lot of sense. So next bird, this one might be quite interesting. I have a feeling we'll see. This is the black-shouldered kite. So this is predator power. When activated, reset the bird feeder and gain a rat if there is one, and then you may give it to another player, and if you do, you lay up to 3 eggs on this bird. So potentially getting 3 eggs in 1 turn sounds very, very strong. And I've got to say, this is the bird that I definitely re-rated after having played with it a few times. I think when I first saw it in Oceania, I was ready to put it in D tier, maybe F tier. I'm gonna go on a limb here and say that this is a B tier bird. I think early game, this is exactly the kind of bird that you want in your grasslands. Get some extra eggs going. What could go wrong using this kind of power and getting the 3 eggs? Go on, tell me, Tay, what could go wrong?
I mean, yeah, this is one of the birds where the high is high, the low is low, right? Like in my experience, I've definitely been burned before. It's like I just needed that 3 eggs, right? In round 1, and then I activate it like 2 times, and you just fell 2 times, like back to back, and then you just end up feeling really bad about it. So I don't know. For me, I'm kind of leaning to a C tier. Like it can work, sure. Like when it works, but it's not something that I will plan my game around.
No, I think you're right. It's such a risky bird, because if you do get it to hit early on in the game and you get those 3 eggs, that can be massive. That can save you potentially a whole turn. It could save you a lot of time and effort trying to get eggs. You don't have to worry about them for a while. But if it misses and you have to keep laying eggs and keep hoping that it's going to hit, it could be a frustrating one for sure. So I think I can get on board with C tier. I think I'll probably put it maybe somewhere in the middle of C tier. But yeah, this is going to be a frustrating one sometimes if you rely on it. But like I say, I think this is better than I thought it was at first. So I want to at least give it, a little bit of credit that I didn't give it when I first played the game. So definitely an interesting power, that one. But we'll move on to our next bird here. We've got the Bly's Hornbills. This is a when play power. You discard all of the eggs from one of your birds with a cavity nest, and then you tuck twice that many cards from the deck behind this bird. So big point bomb. Is that what you're looking for early game?
Absolutely not. I mean, again, big point bomb, right? You see a lot of game where this really swing the game, where you just discard a lot of egg and tuck a lot of cards. But in early game, like eggs are so valuable. Like, you're not looking forward to discard eggs in early game, and this is kind of expensive to play. F tier? It's a good bird,
Yeah.
but early game wise, I just feel like it's not one that you keep from your starting hand.
I think so. It kind of reminds me of a bird like Atlantic Puffin, from the base
Yeah.
game, where it's that kind of bird where if you draw that in round 3, round 4, it's perfect. It's exactly what you want. But
Yeah.
in no way do you ever want to play it at the start of the game, in that round 1. It's such an expensive bird. And like you say, in this case, it's actually removing eggs, which you so desperately need at the start of the game, especially in a game on the Oceania boards where eggs can be difficult to get hold of. So yeah, in terms of pure early game usefulness and something you want to see in the starting hand, I think it's definitely got to go in F-tier, probably towards the lower end, just purely because you're never really going to play it. So unfortunate, but yeah, I think it's definitely got to go there. So F-tier really filling out. We got to get some good birds. We've got to get some good birds eventually and start filling out.
Yeah, it's feeling very bottom heavy.
It definitely is. So we'll see if we can be safe, maybe by one of these next few birds. The next one we've got coming up is the Brolga. Okay. So this is a when activated brown power. So you choose one other player, they lay 1 egg, but you draw 2 cards. So potentially gaining a lot of cards here with this kind of power. Now I have put this in B tier, and for the reason of it being, it's good. I'll be honest, I nearly put this in A tier. That's how good I think it is. But I think it's better. Really? It's good, but it's better in multiplayer. I think if you're playing a 4 or 5 player game, I think this is one of the best birds you could possibly start with. The Brolga. It's so good for just drawing cards and seeing so many cards early on. Obviously, you're giving away an egg, which is not ideal, but that's where I think the multiplayer aspect comes in, because you can pick someone who doesn't need the egg, or you can pick different people each time depending on how you see fit. Obviously, in a 2-player game where you have to give the egg to the same person each time, it's kind of less than ideal, but I still think it's good. I still look to keep this in a lot of scenarios. So it's B tier for me. I get a feeling you might not agree with that one, Taylor.
Yeah, I think again, I feel like this might come down to kind of a personal play style. Just knowing how valuable eggs are. Yeah. In early game Oceania, I would say for me personally, I would almost, this is the bird that I would go off my way not to play it, like even if I don't have other wetland bird.
Wow.
But I do, yeah. I mean, that's just my play style, I do hear your argument that, being able to draw 2 extra cards, you are seeing 2 extra cards, you might be finding that game-changing bird there. So yeah, if you want to put it in B tier, it's fine. Like for me, it's, as I would give it as high as C tier, but no higher. But I can see the argument for B tier.
Yeah, I think for me, this just kind of fits the sort of mold of a better multiplayer bird, where I think, it is one of those birds where I think sometimes actually, just because of the power gaining you extra cards, you actually don't need to activate it that much. You can play it in the early game. You might need to draw cards a couple of times because you've just drawn so many cards that you've probably found something good enough to work with, and then actually you're not activating it for a while and you're not giving away those eggs, and that's where you can be a little bit careful. And I think sometimes you do have to plan maybe the timing of when you're going to use it to make sure you're not giving away the egg at a critical time. But yeah, I mean, for me, if I look at this compared to something like the Australasian shoveler, I would 100% be keeping Brolga over the shoveler. Like for me, that's not even close. I would go Brolga every single time over the shoveler. So I would definitely find it hard putting this in C tier if the shoveler's in B tier. So I think it's got to at least go like that. Maybe I'm just a Brolga fanboy. We'll see. I don't know.
See what the chat say.
We'll see exactly. Viewers at home, you can let us know your thoughts on all of these in the comments. Are we onto something, or are we just massively wrong? Do let us know your thoughts. I'll be interested to see. So yeah, there'll be a few contentious birds, I think, like the Brolga. Hopefully not too many, but we'll kind of see. Like you say, sometimes it just comes down to play style, personal preference. There's no right or wrong answer in any of these cases. These are just our opinions. So we will see. Yeah, we will see if we run into any more of those as we go on. But we've got another bird to go onto now. We've got the brown falcon here. So this is another, when activated power, this is a predator power. So you're looking at a card from the deck, and then if its food cost either has a worm or a rodent in food cost you tuck that bird behind the brown falcon, and if it doesn't, then you got to discard it. So yeah, interesting kind of twist on the predator powers that we might be used to from the base game. Where does this go for you, Tere?
Yeah, I mean, I like it because, it's flexible habitat, easy to play, and I believe the hunting power has a pretty good success rate as well. So I want to put it in either B tier or C tier. I mean, let's look at what we have in B tier right now. Like, can I make a case for a B tier? Even though in most of the cases it's a filler bird, but with the point earning potential, I can see it in B tier as well.
Yeah, so I mean, if it helps, I've got this in C tier, so we're sort of not a million miles off. I think it is that sort of, it's a good filler bird. It's not really the kind of bird that you base your strategy around, but it can go in any habitat. It's got an okay hunting power that has a reasonable chance of success. It's kind of like the red-tailed hawk from the base game, and I think that did go in C tier when we did the original tier list for kind of that reason of it can go anywhere, it can sort of fit in with whatever strategy you're doing, but it's not really something that you automatically look for. So I think C tier is fine. I think probably, is it above these other birds? I think you'd probably put it above the kite at the very least. So
no, I'll put it below kite. It's
below
fine.
The kite, okay.
Because with the kite, you're potentially gaining eggs. That's very useful. This is mostly gaining points, right? So all right.
I think that sounds about right. So we'll go with that in the middle of C tier. So all right, moving on to our next bird here, we've got the budgerigar. So this is again another, when activated power, tuck the smallest bird in the tray behind this bird. So guaranteed point every time. Got to remember that. Yeah. You always get a point because there's always going to be a smallest bird in the tray. But maybe, as we've talked about with some of these other birds, sometimes it's not good to get rid of birds from the tray because there's always that risk that you do kind of reveal other good stuff. So I have put this in C tier because I didn't know where else to put it, if I'm completely honest. It's kind of similar to the brown falcon for me in that sense of it just fits in with whatever you're doing and it gets a point. But again, I've been burned by this bird so many times, especially in the early game. If this is maybe my only wetland bird that I've got, and I play it in the wetlands and I start drawing cards, and I just find that I'm constantly revealing amazing birds for my opponent, and it's just such a tricky position to be in. So yeah, it's really not a bird I look out for that much, but it's that sort of filler potential, which is maybe why it's gone in C tier for me. But what are your thoughts, Tero?
Yeah, I completely agree. It's definitely more of a filler bird because of the habitat flexibility. Yeah, I mean, if I have a choice between brown falcon and this bird, I'll definitely play brown falcon, right? Just for the 5 bird points that you're gonna get. 0 point just feel kind of bad to play early game. So
yeah, it's tricky. I think it is one of those where obviously you're definitely getting the point versus maybe a point, and so over the course of a game, maybe the budgerigar can sort of catch up in terms of the points, but you just never know. And it's it's so tricky. It's unless you're clearly going for a single habitat and you're just going to activate that loads and you're going to get 10 or more tucks on this, then like you say, just that 0 points is kind of not great. So middle of C tier, I think, feels about right for that one. So moving on to our next bird, kind of a similar one here, similar kind of power here. We've got the cockatiel. So this is when activated. This one, you've got to discard a seed, but then you choose a card from the tray and you tuck it behind this bird. So yeah, slightly different, but kind of similar. Is it going to go in a similar place on the tier list?
Yeah, again, filler bird, but is it borderline desperation? Like, it's just a power that you're unlikely to activate early game, right? So yeah, I think it's either low C or high D for me.
I mean, I've got this in D too. I think it is kind of a step below that sort of budgerigar level bird. Like you say, costing the food, where actually in most cases in the early game, you kind of don't want to spend food. You kind of want to keep that to play more birds. I mean, I could see the use of this maybe in a forest engine where actually you are gaining loads of food, but I think even then early, it's just not, it's not a great point conversion. And again, it's that risk of you're drawing birds from the tray and potentially revealing good stuff for the other player. So yeah, it definitely feels feels a bit risky, but in a desperate situation and you need something to go with, then maybe that can work. So D tier for the cockatiel. So moving on to our next bird here, we've got another brown power coming up. This one is Count Raggy's Bird of Paradise, one of the wordier names here. But this one, when activated, choose one other player. You both gain a berry from the supply.
Yeah.
Now, this I found this quite tricky to rate, because I think like some of these other birds we talked about, it's got that interesting kind of power where you're picking one other player, so in theory can be really, really good in multiplayer. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized how useless berries are as a food cost, and how how often do you find yourself looking for a berry to play a bird? Almost never. So I'm kind of I've got this somewhere between C and D tier. Again, kind of not really sure exactly where it goes. You can obviously play it early. It's expensive, but you can use the nectar, so it has that going for it, and the brown power can be okay. But yeah, I just had to try and think back to how many times have I actually kept this in a starting hand and played it in a 1v1 situation, and the answer's not very many. So I don't think it can go that high on the tier list. But yeah, I'm interested to hear your thoughts on this one.
Yeah, I think it's just giving desperation. So, it's just a worse Baltimore Oreo. Like, why would I want to play this?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a fair point. It's kind of very similar power. It is one where, in a 1v1, it's basically the same. Obviously, if you are playing a sort of 3, 4, 5 player game, this kind of power is in theory better, but I'd probably still rather have the Baltimore Oreo for the extra points than the Star Nest. So this does feel kind of desperation. I might put it above the cockatiel just because it does at least gain you some resources. But yeah, these are very much kind of that desperation level, like you say. So another D tier bird there. We'll move on to our next bird in the list here. We've got another game end power. We've got the crested pigeon. So this one at game end, you're caching up to 8 seeds from your supply on this bird. So is this going to go the same way as so many of these other game end powers, Tairo?
Well, I hope people don't take away from this video that all the game ends power are bad in this game. Let's just clarify again. We are looking at the early game potential of all this bird. And with the pigeon, I want to say like it's still in the F tier for me. I think so. I think it kind of fits very much into that sort of Australian raven sort of position where you think, well, maybe it's something to aim towards, and maybe sometimes late in the game I can pick this up and it works perfectly for what I'm trying to do. But just so rarely is that something you're ever going to want to play early on in the game. So I think F tier is right, but as you say, it's always worth having in mind that we are talking, of course, about early game usefulness here with that sort of power. So another F tier. We'll move on to next bit in our list. We've got a few brown powers coming up. The first one here, Crimson Chat. This one is discard any food to tuck one from the deck behind this bird. So a bit of a twist on some of those similar kind of powers that we know, and in some cases love from the base game. Unfortunately, though, I think on the Oceania board, maybe not really something you want to go for. So again, I nearly put this in F tier. I think probably it's in the bottom of D tier. But I could certainly see a situation where it does go in F tier. I think it's just not really something too useful. I think obviously getting a grass and bird early can be good just to unlock a bit more egg generation, but kind of like we talked about with the cockatiel, you don't always want to be discarding food in the early game to trigger a brown power. So it kind of feels of maybe that cockatiel level, but maybe a little bit more flexible. But curious what your views are on this one, Tairo. Yeah, I kind of agree on D tier. It's just one of those, like, if there's other things that go on for like end of round go or bonus card, right?
Exactly.
Then I'll happy to just kind of play as a feeler bird in the grassland. Like 1 food for 4 points, not the worst. So
yeah, exactly. And like you say, if you've got like bird counter or something, or if you're trying to get some tuck cards for an end of round goal, this can be useful. But I think there's quite a few birds like this where you've really got to have some other good reason to play it rather than just the power itself, because that's just not really going to do enough for you. So unfortunately, D tier there for the Crimson Chat. So we'll move on to the next bird In our list here, we've got the Eastern Rosella. So this one, brown power when activated, all players gain a nectar from the supply, and then you also gain a seed. So you're gaining 2 food, but you're giving away nectar. So what do you make of that one, Teire?
I know, this is a very interesting one. So first of all, this is not a bird that you can immediately play, right? Because it requires 2 nectar.
Yep.
So it's kind of costly. It's a bird that I'll be very happy to see if my opponent play it. But the question is, like, do I want to play it myself?
Yeah.
My feeling is it's more of a desperation play. Like if I want to play a forest bird, I'm gonna play something better. Like, I don't want to play this myself. Again, this might come down to my own personal play style where I just don't want to share the nectar in the early game.
Yeah, I think I'm on that same page. I think, you know, I could maybe try and make a case where it would go in C tier instead, but I certainly wouldn't look to play it any more often than that, because I think, like you've said, just the double nectar and the food cost is so off-putting. You know, it means that either you're having to overpay and spend 4 food just to get it down, which in the early game you don't often have that 4 food to start with, but you know, it's a big investment, or you're going to have to spend a turn taking food anyway, at which point, well, you could probably play something else that's going to be better than this. So in certain situations, you know, I'm trying to think situations where you're going in the grasslands, you've maybe got a white stalk or a Franklin skull, and you're very clearly going for a grasslands engine. Being able to get that 2 food can be really, really powerful and really useful, but like you say, actually sometimes you're quite happy to see your opponent play this and give you some free nectar, because that is really valuable in the early game. So I think D tier makes sense. I'd probably put it near the upper end, because it is that desperation, but it can in some situations work. But yeah, just a really, really tricky one, I think, to work with in the early game there. So D tier for the Rosella. We'll move on to the next bird. We've got the Eastern Whipbird coming up here. This one, another brown power when activated. Choose one other player, and then you both gain a seed from the supply. So kind of similar to the Count Raggy's Bird of Paradise that we looked at not too long ago. I think it's maybe slightly better than that. It's kind of a tricky one. It's that better multiplayer feeling where you can pick a different player each time, or maybe pick someone who doesn't need the food and you can get some good benefit. But at the same time, it's gaining seeds, which is not really anything I'm too excited about in an Oceania game when I know I could be gaining nectar instead. So I put this in C tier on the basis that it can work as that first forest bird sometimes, just to get something going. But yeah, it's really not one that I would too often keep in a starting hand, and I certainly don't get excited for it. So C tier for me. Do you agree or disagree, Teire?
Yeah, I have the same feeling. Like, you know, I will play it, but I won't be excited about playing it. So C tier.
Yeah. All right. And do we think maybe it's sort of, is it on par with some of these other
like Brown Falcon, same number of points, but you're gaining food.
Exactly.
Yeah, somewhere around there.
We'll put it there. I think that feels about right. So right.
Yeah.
Interesting power. That one, we've got another interesting power coming up here in the emu.
Yeah.
So this one,
you
gain all the seeds that are in the bird feeder. You keep half, and then you choose how to distribute the remainder among the other players. So very confusing, very wordy. Is that going to sway you at all? Do you think this is a good bird? Where does it go on the tier list?
Yeah, I mean, it does have multi-habitat, which is nice, but you know, like you say, it's a very wordy power for something that's kind of really lackluster. So I think one of the way this bird tripped me is, like, whenever I play this, I always thought that you can re-roll the tray and gain the seed, but you don't.
Yeah.
So after you activate it, if there's no seed, the next time you activate it, you're not going to gain anything. So I almost want to put it in F tier. It's just like, if I don't have a better forest or wetland bird, like, I'm not gonna keep the email. I'm just gonna find something else to work with.
Yeah, I think I would maybe make a case that it does just about go into D tier, where I think in that real desperation scenario, it can sometimes be useful in some situations. Like you say, multi-habitat, so actually being able to maybe get some food from a wetland activation can be useful. And this is definitely one where it's worth saying that if you are playing this and especially a 4 or 5 player game, I think this is actually a pretty good bird, and it would certainly go much higher on the tier list because you can pick and choose who that food's going to and, potentially gain extras yourself. But yeah, just being able to reliably activate this, and like you say, if you're resetting the feeder, this would be a much stronger power and could potentially go in B or C, but I'd probably put it towards that bottom end of D tier in terms of, if you're really desperate, it can work, but don't reliably look to try and keep this too often early on.
Nope.
Absolutely not. So D tier for the emu, we go to our next bird here in the Galar. So again, another brown power when activated. Choose another player. They reset the bird feeder and gain a seed if there is one. And you tuck 2 cards from the deck behind this bird. So guaranteed 2 points every time. I'm going to make a case that this is going to be our first A tier bird of the tier list.
Okay.
So I think for me this goes straight in A tier. There's a few caveats. There's a few things that drag it down. Obviously, that food cost is so off-putting early on. 3 seeds is not what you want to see. I'd much rather that be a bit more flexible. But it's that guaranteed 2 points every time. It's, exactly what you're looking for if you're going for a forest engine. Get that down straight away and start getting points. So yeah, I think if I'm looking for birds that are always great and are going to go in A tier, Galar fits the bill for me. So can we get a bird in A tier here, Tay-Ray?
I think I can agree with it being in A tier. Like I can see why, it would be in A tier. But I must say though, right, given the brown power, like it's a good engine bird, but it's a bird that really doesn't accelerate your game in the early game because you have to gain food to play it, and then when you play it, you are just like gaining point. You are not generating resources, but it just has such a good like long game point earning potential that make it into A tier. So
yeah, absolutely. I think you're right that you're kind of normally you'd want to go for those kind of resource generators, get something that can actually help your tempo and help accelerate board development early on. And this is kind of doing the opposite because actually you know in a lot of cases you'll be giving food to your opponent and potentially helping them out. But yeah, maybe if this was like mid-game tier list, it goes up in S because by that point in the game you're sort of building your engine and getting things going. But yeah, I think this is just one that if it's in a starting hand, I feel like 90% of the time I'm going to be keeping it. It's quite rare I'd be passing up on this in a starting hand. So
I guess one more thing I want to add as well, like I feel like Galah is one of those birds, if you get in your starting hand, it's one that you will try to build your game around it.
Yeah,
like we haven't seen like bird like that so far. But if you get Galah, you try to go like, okay, maybe I'll build an engine in the forest or in the grasslands. So yeah,
I think you're right there. It can sort of dictate some of your other play, and it's quite often you'll be able to find something that can work with this. But this is such a flexible one, and 2 points every time. It's very hard to say no to that. So very glad that we finally got a bird in A tier. Hopefully we've got a few more to go. Hopefully there's more as we sort of work our way through the rest of this list. So coming up our next bird here, we've got when play power. This is the golden-headed Cisticola. So when played, you play another bird into your grasslands and you pay its normal cost with a 1 egg discount. So kind of similar to bird we've already looked at earlier, the reed warbler. Are you going to put it in a similar tier, Tay-Ray?
I guess the power is similar, but in terms of building out your habitat, building out your grassland early game is definitely nice, right? Because of the egg reduction in Oceania board, and then the Cisticola also has a star nest, so maybe high D tier. Like, can we make a case for it to be in C? Maybe not, looking at all the other brown power. So I think still in high D for me.
I think D tier feels right. I think, like you say, it probably is better than the reed warbler. I think I would play it in round 1 more often because, like you say, being able to actually push out to that second column in the grasslands. And often I think in the early game, if you've drawn cards a few times, you've probably got some extra cards. You can then throw those and get some more eggs, which is really what you want to do in the early game to sort of convert those resources into eggs, which you really, really need. So, the star nest can be super helpful, maybe for an end of round goal, maybe for your bonus card. and score points later on. So yeah, I would certainly put this, like I said, above the Reed Warbler. I don't know, maybe somewhere around the Rosella in sort of that that sort of region of D tier. But yeah, not great, but it could certainly work in some situations. So there we go. Sisticola done. We move on to our next bird, which is the Gold's Finch. So again, another game in power. We're working through loads of these. This is an interesting one, though. You play another bird, paying its normal food and egg cost. And then if it has a when played or game end power, you may use it. So I think it's still not a great bird, but I think there's a case to be made that this is an F tier. I think it probably goes in D tier. It could even go as maybe to the bottom end of C tier, but I think it's one where I actually do keep this quite often in a starting hand. I think it's a bird that, unlike a lot of these other yellow powers that we've already looked at, you're always going to be looking to use this. You're always going to have an opportunity to play another bird at the end. You can plan around that. And it's a useful bird to have in that situation. But it does have that sort of filler bird capacity, I think, quite often. You know, if I've not found a forest bird, this can go in the forest, I can get more food. If I've not found a grassland bird, I could put it in the grassland and I'm suddenly getting those extra eggs that I really need. So yeah, like I say, I'm sort of maybe torn between C and D, so maybe you can help sway me either way, Tay-Ray.
Yeah, I mean, that's interesting. That's my first feeling as well, is somewhere between C and D tier, like you say, right? You definitely have some points earning potential at the end of the game, but at the same time, for now in the early game, you only cost 1 food, and you can go in any habitat that you need it to be. So I guess the way I look at it is, you know, if you look at the high D tier, we have Black Naughty and the Rosella. Compared to the Finch, like, I would much rather play or keep the Finch in the early game. So I want to kind of put it in low C tier.
Yeah, I think to be honest, I think low C tier does feel about right. It does sort of fit that mold of that sort of cheap filler bird. Is exactly that situation of that 1 food, can go in any habitat, and you know you're going to get some usage out of it later on. So I think I'm on board with that. Somewhere in the low C tier makes sense.
Especially if you look at it compared to the Bergeriger, it's basically about the same amount of point that you're going to get for 1 food and same habitat flexibility. Absolutely.
Yeah, it's probably, to be honest, I might even look to keep it in more situations than the Budgerigar. So now you say that, I think that probably does feel about right. It's still towards that bottom end, but that sort of cheap filler bird capacity. I think that makes sense. So we finally found a good yellow power. That's good to know. They're not all absolutely terrible in the early games. So moving on to our next bird here, we're back to the brown power. So we've got the green pygmy goose here. So when activated, draw 2 from the deck. You get to keep 1 and then give the other to another player. So interesting power. Where do you think that belongs on the tier list, Ray?
Yeah, I mean, we kind of talk a little bit about this, right? Drawing 2 cards, being able to see, 2 extra card when you activate this, and then you can choose to give, probably the lesser or less useful card to your opponent. So I think this fit in the criteria of B tier, is definitely beneficial, almost always, I want to say. Yeah,
I think it goes in B2 as well. And I kind of, if I try and compare it to this Australasian shoveler, it's sort of like that, but better, because you have the control, right? You're drawing both cards, and you can kind of pick the one that you like the best and give the other to your opponent, versus that sort of random, maybe both of you draw something good, or maybe actually your opponent could draw something better from the deck in that situation. You just never know. So yeah, I definitely like this bird. Maybe it does go above Brolga. It could even, to be honest, go above the Nightjar in terms of just, we're going to probably say this a few times, but being able to see cards in the early game is so important, and having a brown power like the Pygmy Goose, just seeing those extra cards, definitely feels like a strong brown power to be going for.
I guess another point as well, right? With the addition of Oceania, now your deck is even become bigger, right? There's even more cards in the deck. So I think that's a reason why we're valuing like seeing more cards higher.
Absolutely. I think generally I would always value that early card draw above so many other types of powers. So we've not had too many of those sorts of card drawing brown powers come up. I'm sure we'll get to more throughout the rest of the list, but yeah, I think that sort of power, as you say, with the Pygmy Goose, where you're drawing from the deck and sort of keeping the best of the two, very, very strong power, and rightly into B tier there. So we move on to our next bird. We've got the Grey Butcher Bird coming up here. This is a Predator power. So you're looking at a card from the deck, and then if its wingspan is less than 40 centimeters, you tuck it behind this bird and cash a rat from the supply. So it's our first tuck and cash bird. We're going to see where this is going to go on the tier list. Now, I kind of think this is probably around that sort of brown falcon territory in the C tier, where it's a good enough brown power. I think it's a better brown power than the brown falcon. And you do obviously have that same habitat flexibility, but it is a little bit more expensive, which you kind of don't necessarily always want in that early game. So that does maybe make me think, is it going to be above or below the brown falcon? But for me, it is in C tier. So yeah, how do you feel about that one, Tay?
Yeah, I think in C tier sounds about right. But for me, because it's more expensive, I will put it below brown falcon. It's one of the bird, at least for me, when I first started playing Oceania, you're kind of tempted to make this into an engine bird because of the potential of earning 2 points. But then you quickly learn that it's just not a reliable source for points. So yeah, again, filler bird in early game, fine.
It's definitely a risky one, and I think, to be honest, like any of these predator powers that we've already seen, and probably like some of these other ones that we will see in the rest of the video, there's always a risk. There's always that risk that you're not going to get a point, that they're not going to hit. And you've got to sort of live with that if you are going to play this kind of bird. So yeah, it can sort of fit into any strategy, but just maybe that's slightly too high of a food cost to prevent it from a higher tier. So C tier for the Butcher Bird. We're going to move on to our next bird in the list. We've got another predator power here. This one is the Grey Shrike Thrush. So this one, when activated, you're resetting the bird feeder and gaining all of the rodents, if there are any. And then you can choose if you want to cash any or all of them on this bird. So interesting power. Where is this going to go on the tier list for you?
Yeah, I mean, when I look at this bird, I'm seeing this bird when it's high, it's really high. But when it's low, like, you're okay with it, it's not the worst. So, and the fact that, there's the potential you can gain multiple rats, I think it's definitely always beneficial. Is it good enough to go into A tier? I'm not sure, but at least B tier for me.
Yeah, I think I had the similar kind of conundrum thinking about this. Is this really good enough to go into A tier? And I think my conclusion was probably not just about. I think high B tier fits. I think, like you say, it's having that option sometimes where you can use this and gain a bunch of rodents early on. I mean, there's obvious synergies if you've got Rodentologist or Falconer to suddenly be able to play a load of birds that fit with exactly the strategy you're going for. But I also really like that it's got that flexibility where actually, if you're running a forest engine and you're maybe using this in round 3, round 4, you can just turn it all into points and you don't have to worry, and you can potentially get 2 or 3 on a single turn, and that's just so satisfying. But yeah, it's really not one you can rely too much on. But low food cost, going in the forest, getting some extra food, it's exactly what I'm looking for really in that early game. So I think upper end of B tier, I think for me makes sense, just maybe not quite enough to go into A tier.
Yeah, it's like the thing we talked before, it's not the bird that will make you change your strategy or build your strategy around. So I think B tier sounds about right.
Absolutely. All right. Glad to get another good bird on the board. We'll see if that continues as we go on to our next bird here. We have got the Grey Teal. So this one is another brown power. When activated, you look at 3 cards from the deck and keep a wetland bird if there is one. And you may add it to your hand or tuck it behind this bird, and then you discard the other cards. So, yeah, really wordy power, this one. Really interesting. Definitely took me a while to kind of wrap my head around this when first playing with the expansion. And kind of similar struggles here in terms of where I put this. I'm sort of maybe somewhere between B and C tier. I think this is, to be honest, not a bird I actually play that often. I really can't remember too many situations where I have played this early on. I think it looks like a good power in theory because you're looking at extra cards from the deck and you're keeping birds, which is kind of what you want. You know, maybe tucking them as well if you're going to go with it in an engine. But I sort of compare this maybe to the Ibis that we looked at before, and I think I'd probably rather take the Ibis. So I think it is in C tier, but yeah, interested what you think of this one, Taylor.
Yeah, I think it's somewhere between B and C for me as well. It's interesting that, you know, you're comparing it to Ibis. So for me, I would take this over the Ibis because in my experience, the power actually hit more often than you expected. Like, you know, I have game where like I just keep hitting every time I activate it. And then there's this idea that, you know, there's a lot of big point birds in the wetland. So this might be a bird that help you to kind of dig and find those big point birds in the wetland. So yeah, I think C tier is fine. Personally, I would take it over the Ibis, but I don't think they're too far apart.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. We can put them alongside each other. I think it's definitely an interesting power, and I kind of think of it almost as, you know, it's getting extra wetland birds, but when I've already played a wetland bird, is that really what I'm looking for in the early game? You know, if this is getting maybe forest birds instead, I might be more interested because that's what I want. But I think you make a good point that, certainly as you go through the game and you're looking for birds like puffin and woodstock, that, you know, you want to play those in the wetlands. And even if those aren't coming up, and if you can hopefully get a point from this, it's certainly not a bad power. But yeah, as we've kind of talked about, anytime you're sort of being able to look at extra cards early on in the game, that's definitely a good power. So I think, C tier. C tier upper end makes sense for the grey teal. So we go on to our next bird here. We've got the grey warbler. So this is the last of a trio of birds that we've already looked at. Two of them like this. When played, you play another bird, this time in your forest, pay its normal cost with a 1 egg discount. So yeah, we've already got both of those previous birds in D tier. Is this going to follow suit into D tier, Tay-Ray?
Yeah, I think it's more or less the same. You know, I would play, you know, building up your forest in early game, allow you to, you know, unlock that flexibility to exchange card for food is nice. So yeah, more or less around the Sisticola.
Yeah, I think that sounds about right. I think if I'm certainly comparing it between the reed warbler and the Sisticola, I think it's more like the Sisticola in that actually you would want to play it and unlock that benefit of being able to then discard extra cards and get some more food. And again, like the Sisticola, it's got that star nest, which can really definitely come in handy. So yeah, I'd probably put it alongside. I don't know if I could necessarily split hairs between the two of them, but definitely kind of similar powers and similar usefulness, I think, in that early game. So D tier for the grey warbler. Next bird on the list, we have got the grey-headed mannequin. So we're working through these yellow powers. Got another one here. Play another bird, paying its normal food cost, but you ignore an egg in its egg cost, and then if it has a when played or game in power, you may use it. So yeah, very similar to the goldfinch that we already looked at that has gone into C tier. I think it probably still does go into C tier, this one, but maybe lower than the goldfinch. I think obviously
absolutely
that, you know, lack of habitat flexibility is a big drawback, but I think this is often one that I do see myself keeping in the early game. It's got that low food cost if I need something in, the grasslands to play, and just unlock that extra egg that I'd be getting. Again, the star nest maybe helps for an end of round goal, and it's a power I know I'm going to be able to use later on. So I think it probably does still just about make it into C tier for me. But what do you think, Tay-Ray?
Yeah, I think it's very similar to goldfinch, but just not as useful because of the limitation on habitat. So low C tier sounds good.
All right, we'll put it towards that bottom end of the C tier. So moving on to our next bird, we've got a pink power. I feel like we've not had one of those in a little while. This one, the Horsfield's Bronze Cuckoo. And so this is an egg-laying pink power. So when another player takes a lay eggs action, you lay 1 egg on a bird with a wingspan less than 30 centimeters. So potentially getting you some eggs. Is that going to make you want to put this high on the tier list, Tay-Ray, or what do you feel about this one?
Oh yeah, this is definitely high on my tier list. I mean, eggs, like we say, super premium in Oceania, especially in early game, coupled with flexible habitat and low food costs. Yeah, I would put it. Is it always great? I mean, definitely at least B tier. But do you think it has enough credit or merit to go into A tier?
I think it probably doesn't. I think
Okay.
for me it's probably I'd say between kind of low end of B tier to maybe into that high end
Okay.
of C tier. It sort of fills that gap of being that cheap filler bird, but also, being a good multiplayer bird. I think in a
Yeah.
1v1 it's quite risky, I think, to go with some of these pink powers too early on, especially with an
Yeah.
egg generating one, because you could play this early on in the game and then your opponent plays a chipping sparrow or a bush tit or something,
That's fine.
and suddenly you're getting no usage out of this. So I think, yeah, it's so situational that if you can see your opponent's clearly going grasslands and you can get this down. Of course, you need another bird that has, wingspan less than 30, which
Yeah.
is not always going to be the case as well early on. So I think you
That's true.
got to bear that in mind. But yeah, I would certainly be looking at B tier, I think, for this one. The low food cost is definitely nice, but yeah, I think it's there's no guarantees necessarily of getting too many activations, and I think that definitely prevents it from being that sort of always great that we'd look for A tier.
Okay. B tier sounds good.
B tier for the bronze cuckoo. So we move on to our next bird. We've got this time Horsfield's bushlark. So this one is a brown power. When activated, discard a seed, and if you do, lay up to 2 eggs on this bird. So kind of an interesting sounding power. But when I thought about this one, I thought, have I ever kept this in a starting hand? And the answer to that is no.
Yeah.
No, I haven't.
Yeah.
Have I ever picked this up from the tray early on? No, I haven't. So as appealing as it might sound, it sort of ticks the boxes of brown power, get some extra eggs. I put this in F tier. I just never would ever look at keeping this early on. So I've gone there. I've gone there. Feel free to disagree.
Okay.
But it's F tier for me.
Yeah, I mean, okay, listen, imagine the situation where, it's not in your starting hand. You did not pick it up from the tray, but you just happen to pick it up when you drop line from the top of your deck and you have a good force going. Like, would you try to make it work in early game so that, you generate a couple more eggs in one turn, potentially?
I'm not even sure I would.
Okay. I mean, compared
to... I don't think I've ever been excited to draw this card from the deck, so...
Okay.
Maybe that's just fair. Me, but...
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, it's not a great power. Like, this is not one bird that you are excited to play. But let me put this interesting thought exercise out there. Like, if you got Black Shoulder Kite and Bushlark in your hand, which one would you try to play?
I mean, I'd go for the kite. That's me.
Oh wow!
I'd go for the gamble.
Oh wow! Oh wow! That say a lot about
maybe
you.
Maybe that's an insight into our different personalities there. So
yeah. I mean, for me, I'll try to make the bushlark work.
Interesting.
If I have the kite.
So are you saying it's C tier? Is that what I'm hearing?
I mean, I'm fine if we want to split the difference and put it in D tier. I certainly don't think it's all the way to F tier. It has some uses. Especially imagine if your opponent is giving you seed, with all the seed sharing power. I don't know. Yeah, it get into really specific, but I think with the brown power, D tier.
I think it's just a tricky way. I mean, if it had more egg space and I could reliably use it a few times in a row, I might be more inclined. But it's just that fact that you use it once and you're done, and you've then got to make sure you're using up those eggs before you go back is a tricky one. So I'll make peace with it going in D tier. I'm not especially happy about that, but I can live. I can live with it, and we'll move on to our next bird, which is a when played bird. So this one is the Kia. So you draw a bonus card, and then you can discard any number of food from your supply to draw that many additional bonus cards, keeping one of the cards you drew and discarding the rest. So, early game How does this feel to you, the Kia?
Right. Looking at the power, definitely you're not gonna use the power in early game in terms of like discarding food to get more bonus cards. So at most you're gonna gain 1 bonus card in early game. And at best, this is gonna be a filler card for Forest. So I want to say at most it's D tier, but I really feel like it's more or less a F tier bird. I don't know. How do you feel?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me it probably fits in the same sort of region as Abbott's Booby, where you kind of think, you don't really want to play it early on. You kind of want to save that for the end of the game, but if you have to play it early on in the game, just to fill something, then it can work. And to be honest, it is one that I might try and keep from a starting hand or pick up early on with a view to then playing it later and not necessarily early on. So yeah, I think it feels that desperation level, but also don't play it too early. Think about maybe picking it up and keeping it for later. And we may have some other birds that come into that category as well, but like I say, does feel quite similar to the Abbott's Booby there.
That's fair.
All right, fair into D tier is the Kia. We move on to our next bird. We've got a brown power here, the Kelp Gull. So this one, you discard any number of foods to draw that many cards. So really unique power, this one. Discarding food, gaining extra cards. We always talk about gaining extra cards being super useful. I found this one really hard to rank because I feel this is so situational. I think if you've got a great forest going, you've got loads of food generation, maybe your opponent's got that Rosella and is just throwing food at you, and you can potentially use this power to get extra cards. It's great. But so often you actually don't have that extra food, and you want to use that food to play more birds. So I'm sort of between C and D tier. D tier feels harsh, but maybe that's where it belongs. Potentially getting extra cards is nice, but yeah, it feels like such a tricky one to use early. So I'm very interested to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, I think the thing that's going for me is the 6 bird points that you get for 2 food, and relatively easy to play food type. Looking at what we have so far, I think it kind of fit into the low end of C tier, where it's like a filler bird, right? But at the same time, you're getting additional bird points that kind of make up for it. And then, like you say, in certain situations, the brown power can potentially come in play. So not quite as D tier for me.
Yeah, I think that feels about right. And certainly if I look at something like this Australian shell duck that we looked at way back at the start of this tier list, it's sort of in that similar area for me of I'm never really that happy to see it. And I might sometimes rather have no wetland bird than have it, but actually it's something, and I might be able to use it and get some extra cards and get some usage. So there are situations where it can work, but C tier for that sort of situationalness. That feels good to me. So Kelp Gull into C tier. We move next on to the Koreru. So another brown power, this one in the forest. When activated, if the player to your left has a nectar in their personal supply, you gain 1 from their general supply. So potentially gaining nectar, but is that potentially going to drag it back a little bit?
Yeah, I think this is an interesting one. Again, the potential to gain nectar is going to be so good, not just in early game, but throughout the game. But in my experience, it's also quite easy for your opponent to block this power in early game, right? Once they see this bird down, they're going to spend the nectar right away. So it's really hard to gain that nectar that you really want in early game to accelerate your game. So I want to say, I guess B tier is like beneficial, like just in terms of like long game wise, like maybe somewhere between B and C. What do you think?
Yeah, I think I would certainly lean more towards C. I think like you've hit the nail on the head in terms of the real drawback, which is that it's just so easy to block this, and you've really got a time when you're going to use it. And I think, particularly if you're sort of looking into round 2, it's really difficult to use that early on in the round when nectar has already been discarded from the previous round. So your opponent sees this and they think, no way am I gaining any nectar, I'm going to leave that. And then you get no benefit, you get no activation. And 3 points for that 2 food and a sort of a maybe brown power You know, I'd rather have the surefire whip bird, for example, as guaranteeing getting me some food. So I think sort of maybe lower end, maybe to be honest, alongside the kelp gullers, that sort of, I would maybe rather not play it, but in a pinch it can sometimes work. So
yeah,
that feels okay to me. So good, we'll move on to the next bird. This one I'm hoping is going to be less controversial. We've got the Koromako. So when activated, discard any number of rats to gain that many nectar. So again, you're gaining nectar here, but is that really a good power? I think for me, I'm gonna say it again, I think this goes in F tier. I think this is just like, if you're looking at worst brown powers in the game, I think this has a very, very strong case for that. There's maybe one or two others that we may still come onto, but it's certainly in the conversation. And I think the only way that I unlocked this in my bird atlas on the game was by deliberately playing it. I don't think there was ever a situation where this was a good play, and I played it because of that. So am I okay to just put this straight into F tier?
I think straight to F tier. I feel like it's almost feel like when they try to balance all the bird, they kind of miss this bird. It's mind-boggling how bad this is.
I have seen people say that they wonder if this is a typo, because 4 points, I mean, to be honest, even if this was like 7 or 8 points, I'd maybe still have to think twice about whether I go with it because the power's so bad. But for 4 points and such a high food cost, and it's not even actually gaining you any resources. You're having to trade away a rat, which is already a rare resource, to be able to then gain nectar. So not a great one, and I think sadly does belong in F tier there, the Koromako. So unfortunate, but we'll move on to our next bird here. We've got the Kakapo. This is a game end power. Draw 4 bonus cards, keep 1 and discard the other 3. So bonus card bird, game in power. We've seen a sort of few similar birds like this. Where is it going to go on the tier list, Tairo?
Oh yeah, Kakapo. Again, going back to when I play the game, whenever I see my opponent play the Kakapo, you always get that sinking feeling. Oh my god, this bird is just so good. You know, if it's a close game, they're gonna close the gap. They're gonna swing the game with this bird. Early game wise, again, cherry and grain, not too bad, and you're gonna get the points back for the food that you spend. So I'm kind of looking at around the same tier as the goldfinch, maybe, right? It's one of those birds like you invest the food as a feeler bird, but then you're gonna gain the points back later. The only difference is it only works in forest, so. Maybe C tier, but I can also see it just being a D tier bird just because of how desperate you have to be to play this early game.
Yeah, I think for me this kind of fits into that same sort of mold of the Abbott's Booby Kia situation where you kind of think, I could play it early, and I think it's probably slightly better early than these because the power is always going to be triggered later. You're always going to get that benefit at the end of the game, and you're not forced to sort of use it in a maybe slightly suboptimal way in that you are with sort of Abbott's Booby and Kia type birds. So I think it is that sort of similar situation though, where it's not quite in that cheap filler category because it is a couple of food and it is a bit off-putting. And I think it's either a desperate play or it is a you want to play it later situation. So I think somewhere in the middle of D tier maybe.
I like that if you put it around the Abbott's Boobies area, just because they are very close.
These are very similar. So we'll put it. I'll tell you what, we'll put it just to the left, so we kind of have that in mind for that comparison. So all right, Kakapo into D tier for its early game usefulness. We'll go on to the next bird in our list, which is the Laughing Kookaburra. So brown power, predator power. When activated, you reset the bird feeder, and if you do, gain a worm, a fish, or a rat from the bird feeder if there is one. So I really like this power. I think this is a really good one. I'm going to make a case for it to go in A tier. I think that gaining food from the wetlands potentially. I've had a lot of good games opening in the wetlands with this bird. You're gaining 3 different types of food potentially. You've got a good chance of success. And yeah, really, really helpful just to get that early tempo with a bit more food. So it's not nectar, but I still think this is one that is always great for me and goes into A tier. But what do you think?
I mean, I like the power too. Like you say, it's very flexible, and those 1 or 2 food that you gain early game can really accelerate your game early on. Yeah, given what we have so far, I can see, like, maybe put it in the low end of A tiers, and then we can compare it to what else that comes up.
Yeah, I think at the moment putting it next to Galar is maybe overrating it slightly and is maybe where there's some hesitancy. But I think certainly, if I compare this to a Grey Shrike Thrush, I think I take the Kookaburra every day. With that nice power, being able to go in the wetlands and get that extra food. It's the start of a really strong engine potentially, and just getting that extra food. So I will put it up there next to Galar. But yeah, I think hopefully we'll get some more A tier birds that can sort of maybe fill the gap or create a bit of a gap between these two birds. But good. I'm glad we got another A tier bird on the board for now. At least there with the Kookaburra. So we'll move on to our next bird on the list, which is the lesser frigate bird. So this is a wetland bird. When activated, all players may discard an egg from a wetland bird, and then each player that discarded an egg gains a food from the supply. So a bit of a weird power where you're potentially helping other players, but you're potentially gaining some food. So how do you sort of balance those two aspects of it, and where do you think this goes on the tier list?
Right. I mean, the power is not something that you're going to activate a lot in early game, just because you don't have great access to eggs in early game. It's just sort of like a filler bird with 3 food for 9 points. The power might be useful later, but again, it's a power that your opponent have access to as well. It reminds me kind of a Black Naughty, but not as good. I almost want to put it in F tier. Like, do I want to keep this if that's my wetland bird in my starting hand, or pick it up to play it? I feel like for me it's no. So
yeah, it's such a tricky one. I think it's in a way it has a bit more going for it than the Noddy, because you can play it turn 1 with the slightly more flexible food cost, but it's like you say, it's just a power that you're really not going to use that much. It's only got 1 egg space on its own, so to be able to use it early, you're already having to sacrifice a bit of tempo and a bit of egg gaining for yourself. So yeah, I think it's one where I'd never be excited to see this as the wetland bird, but if it's my only wetland bird, I'd still play it. It is that sort of desperation level, I think, which I think that probably does put it somewhere into D tier, but maybe of that sort of cockatiel level of desperation, if you just need something to get going and you're not really going to use the power. So I think it's certainly better than these other sort of brown powers that we've got in the F tier. I'd like to make a case at least for it to go into D tier. So
that's fair.
Good. All right, into D tier for the frigate bird. We'll go to the next bird on our list, which is Lewin's Honey Eater. So we've got a forest brown power here. Choose one other player, and you both gain a nectar. So again, we've sort of looked at some similar birds like this, where you're sort of maybe gaining nectar, but maybe helping someone else with a bit of nectar.
Right.
I think for me, this goes in B tier, and I think you're going to disagree with me because I know you don't like giving away nectar. But I think this fits that perfect mold of it's good, but it's better in a multiplayer game. So, if you're playing this 4 or 5 player game, this is amazing because you're gaining a nectar and you pick and choose who do I want to give nectar to, give it to the person who needs it the least, give it to someone else different each time. And that works out really nicely. But I could potentially be swayed into bringing it down a little bit because there's always that nervousness about giving away the nectar. So, I would definitely like to hear what you feel about this one, Tairo.
Yeah, I mean, for me, same is somewhere around C tier. It can work. In certain situation, but for my personal playstyle, I just don't like the idea of just giving away nectar. Especially, if you think about this, if you play this in your forest, right, you already have a better food access than your opponent lately. And then you're just like giving away nectar to help your opponent. So if you put it in B tier, it would be like a low B tier for me.
Yeah, I think you're right in that sense of, you're basically you're gaining a nectar, but you're having to use a turn to gain that nectar, whereas your opponent who might not have that food access going, you're automatically giving them a nectar. So yeah, I mean, it's not one that I'm ever really that excited to see in a starting hand. I think it maybe is more of that sort of can work level. So maybe it's in that upper end. Maybe slightly below some of these card drawing powers, but certainly of that level of situationally it can be better, can be worse. Like I say, in multiplayer definitely a higher tier, but giving away nectar always risky, so I understand the reservations there. So into C tier for the Honey Eater, we'll go to our next bird, and this is definitely a controversial one. We'll see if we can agree. I know there will be people watching this who will have strong opinions on the little penguin. So this is Wetland Predator power. When activated, draw and discard 5 cards from the deck. And then for each fish in the food costs, you cash a fish from the supply on this bird. So yeah, bit of an enigma, this one. Where do you put the little penguin?
Yep. Again, little penguin, high is high, low is really low. And I feel like, the normal distribution definitely skewed towards the low end, right? Like you always just feel disappointed by the penguin during the game. So again, looking at what we have so far, definitely more in line with Naughty, right? In terms of the power and the game, the point gaining potential. So for me, I don't think it should go higher than D tier for sure.
Yeah, it's a tricky one. I think it's so much swayed by recent experience. I think if someone has a good game with the penguin, you'd put it in A tier. You'd say maybe even S tier. It's amazing and it won me the game. But then, you could play it the next day and it misses every time and it belongs in F tier. So it's such a polarizing one, and it's so difficult to rank. I think I probably like it maybe a bit more than a Noddy. I think.
Oh wow!
I mean, the power is better. The power, in theory, hits more, and you will get more points in the long run from a penguin than you will from a Noddy. Now, sometimes that Noddy fish is useful to be able to keep, but they are both so expensive, and I don't know. I come back to this question a lot on this tier list is, am I excited to see the little penguin in a starting hand? And it might depend how I'm feeling on the day, but maybe not. Maybe not.
I must remind you, Flan, like, so far in the video, one thing that I learned is you are very picky about your wetland bird. There were a couple situations you say like, you'd rather not have wetland bird than to play this bird.
That is true.
So
yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think to be honest, for me, if I look at birds like the shelduck and the kelp gull, would I rather have a penguin than those? I probably would. I would probably put it above those in the tier list.
Wow.
But I know that you wouldn't.
That is very...
So we're gonna have to compromise.
I feel like that's the first hot take of this video. I'm interested to hear what the chat say about this.
I don't know how we've got this far in with that being the first hot take. I'm sure there will be people who feel there will have been others before this, but yeah, like I said, penguin is so polarizing, and I'm sure we could get 50 people commenting and they'd all have different opinions on the penguin. That's how tricky it is. So it sounds like maybe we're going with D tier. Would you put it above the Noddy, below the Noddy? I feel like it goes above the Noddy, but that's me.
I feel like it's below, because with Noddy you gain the fish that you can use. So
yeah, I mean, again, it comes back to this question of that early game usefulness, right? That extra fish can be useful. I think again, if we're looking at sort of round 2 tier list, I'll probably be happier seeing the penguin, but yeah, okay. Begrudgingly, we'll go with D tier. We'll put it below the Noddy, but for the penguin fans out there, I've got your back. Don't you worry. I like this bird as well. So definitely a tricky one. So we'll move on from that one. Hopefully, some less controversial birds coming up. Next one we've got is the little pied cormorant. So this one is a game end power, like a few we've had before. This one, you lay an egg on each bird with a platform nest, including this one. So, yeah, kind of similar maybe to some of these other wetland birds that we've seen come up before and some of these other game empowers. I find this one quite tricky because I actually quite like this bird. I think this is certainly one that, you know, I've kept in starting hands and had really good games with it, but it's not really got that early game utility. So I'd like to make a case for it being in D tier and that sort of desperation play. I think it is better than a lot of these other wetland powers and these other game powers, but I could certainly see the comparisons with Black Swan, which we do have in F tier. So I'm interested to hear where you think this one should go.
Yeah, I mean, I hear your points. In terms of power, it's very similar to Black Swan, but you know, you kind of invest 2 food instead of 3 food, so that made me feel like it's more on par with, you know, the Kakapo Kia gang over there, where it's a filler bird, and you might make a few points.
Yeah, I think certainly if I compare it to that sort of Abbott Spoobie, it does feel that similar mold. And to be honest, like the Kakapo, like you say, with that game end, and I think the slightly cheaper cost. I think I would like to put it somewhere probably towards the bottom of D tier. Do you think that sounds about right?
Yeah, that sounds
maybe we'll put it at least next to these other birds. So
yeah,
we have that in mind. So okay, another D tier bird there, and we've got another game end power coming up next in the Magpie Lark. So this is one of the most confusing powers, one of the wordiest. I guarantee 90% of you watching have played this bird and got confused about how it works. I will do my best to read the power properly. So, game end, you discard 2 eggs from your forest, and then if you do, you play a bird in your grasslands at its normal food cost, but ignoring the egg cost. And then if it has a when played or game end power, you may use it. So, yeah, very strange power, but kind of similar, maybe to some of these other game end powers that we've looked at before that play birds. So does it go in the same sort of area of the tier list as those?
Yeah, I think it basically go alongside with Goldfinch, you know, in the C tier. And I must say, I'm not even ashamed to admit that, you know, I have misplayed this power quite a few times. I just totally forgot that, I need to play the bird in the grassland, even though I'm discarding 8 in the forest and I've already filled up my grasslands. So it does happen. It
does happen. It happens to the best of us. Like I say, it's almost a rite of passage, I think, playing Oceania to have misplayed a Magpie Lark. So easily done. But yeah, I think it's probably more akin to that sort of grey-headed mannequin of you lose that flexibility of the habitats and you lose that flexibility of where the bird can be played, but a perfectly serviceable filler in the grasslands, get some extra eggs going. And yeah, as long as you pay attention and you know what the power does, it's one that you will use at the end of the game. So C tier for the Magpie Lark. We will go next on to Major Mitchell's Cockatoo. So we've got a brown power here. When activated, tuck a card from your hand behind this bird, and then if you do, all players gain a seed from the supply. Now, for me, it's that all players bit of it that is the big caveat and the big thing that I don't like about this power. And I probably am going to put this in D tier because I just don't think I've ever really been excited to keep this in a starting hand. I don't think I've ever really got that much usage out of it. So, yeah, it feels like a desperation. I can't find anything else for the forest and I've been digging for 4 turns and I need something. That's the scenario where I play this. I don't really see too many other situations. So, yeah, D tier for me. But what do you think, Tere?
Yeah, that's interesting. I think my first instinct is to go to C tier. But now that, you know, I look at our tier list so far again, you know, comparing to the Whitbird, would I play this? Or is this similar enough, like, you know, to the Whitbird? Or is it similar to the Paradise, the Bird of Paradise, where everyone just gained food? So
yeah,
I feel like it's kind of in between.
I think so. I think it's probably easiest to compare to that Whitbird because it's the same food, but obviously in the Whitbird case, I mean, again, looking in a 1v1 scenario, you're still giving food to every player. But it's that cost of having to tuck a card, and actually, a lot of the time in your forest, you're able to discard cards for any extra food, and you're maybe able to get nectar with that. So, you know, you can,
that's a very good point.
Can get points with this, and it is kind of maybe useful, but Yeah, I don't know. Like I say, in terms of early game usefulness, I don't know. I'd probably rather see a Rosella come up, to be honest, than see a cockatoo. So I'd probably put it around here. But yeah, definitely a bit of a tricky one to kind of work with for sure. So D tier looks like for the cockatoo will go to our next bit of the list, which is the Malafaux. So another game end. A few of those recently. This one, you lay 1 egg on each of your birds with a ground nest, including this one. So yeah, a few similar powers have come up to this one. So where is this going to go in the tier list?
So this is similar to the Cormorant. Yeah, I would say the D tier, right? Feel a bird and potentially make more points at the end of the game. So
yeah,
not too controversial for me.
No, I think that feels about right. Like you say, it's very similar to the Cormorant, very similar to that sort of situation of play it for a bit of a filler power, but yeah, you're not going to get too much else out of it. So hopefully straightforward that. We come to our next bird in the list, which is the maned duck. So this is when activated, tuck up to 3 cards from your hand behind this bird, and then if you tuck at least 1, gain a seed from the supply. Now, I'm not going to waste any time. This goes straight into A tier for me. One of the best birds in Oceania. I'm always happy to see this in a starting hand. So yeah, got to go in A tier for me.
Yeah, I mean, there's no question that this is an A tier bird. Again, it has the feeling of if you have this in your starting hand, you're going to build your game around it, right? You're going to try to make this work. The only thing I would caution about the maned duck, right? It definitely have certain window of playing it. Like if you got it in late game, like late round 2 or round 3, like it would be hard to make it work. But if you start with it, like it's pretty easy to build around it.
Yeah, I mean, I think if I'm looking for the ideal starting hand bird, this gets points, this gets food in the wetlands, which is always useful. And yeah, it's got that sort of double usage of the early game utility of gaining tempo, but also it can so easily form those potent wetland engines with a Canada goose or a sandhill crane and just get that crazy wetlands going. So yeah, strong bird. I mean, would you say it's above or below Galar? Is this gonna take the top spot on our list?
After hearing your spiel about this, I think it's better than Galar in the sense that, again, you gain resource, right? That's very useful.
I would always, I think if I had to choose, and it's a tough choice, but if I had to choose between one of these two in a starting hand, I'd more lean towards the maned duck option. So yeah, both good birds, but I think maned duck is going to go in the top spot here in A tier. So this A tier is looking very empty, but it's nice to be able to add some more birds to that. We'll see if that's going to continue as we continue on this list. The next bird on our list is the many-coloured fruit dove. So this is forest brown power. All players gain a berry from the supply, but you gain 1 additional berry. So you're gaining extra food here. Is that going to put it high on the tier list?
But like you say, it's cherry. Like who wants cherry in Oceania? Yeah. I think it's definitely more of a B or C tier bird, like no higher than B for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I've got it in B tier. I think it is better than that sort of Count Raggy's Bird of Paradise we talked about, and I think it probably is better in the early game at least compared to a Baltimore Oriole type bird. But just because you are at least getting 2 berries, and there's not always going to be opportunities to spend those berries, but if you can find them, maybe even if you're forcing birds down, but just being able to gain that extra food, I think that is useful. So certainly if I compare this to like a shrike thrush, I think of those as kind of broadly similar in terms of cheap, single food, get extra food in the forest. So yeah, B tier feels good for the fruit dove. We'll go to our next bird on the list, which is the masked lapwing. So this is when played, you reset the bird feeder, and then for each type of food in the bird feeder, you gain 1 of that type. So potentially gaining some extra food, a lot of it at the early game. And I'm going to put this in A tier, I think. I think this has got to go up there. Certainly at very least high B. I know it's maybe not as controversial as the penguin, but there's lots of opinions on, is this bird as good as it sounds? I think it's maybe not as good as it sounds, but it is still really good. Being able to play it turn 1 and potentially get 5 or 6 food, massive tempo gainer. You can play loads of birds, so I'd like to put it in A tier, but what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's unquestionable that it's at least in A tier, and I don't
Ooh.
know who is saying that this is, might not be as good as it sounds. Like this is just as good as it sounds, or even better. Like, being able to get that 4 or 5 food in the early game is such a huge tempo boost in the early game. So I think for me, undeniably, is in A tier. Like, I would even put it above Kookaburra.
Yeah. I can see that.
Yeah.
I can see that.
Yeah.
I think I the only reason I say it's maybe it's similar to the penguin in terms of if you have a bad experience playing this and only getting maybe 2 food, it can be really off-putting. But yeah, chances are you're going to get a good number. You're going to get at least 4 or 5 food off this. So being able to gain that extra tempo early on, food is exactly what we're looking for, and this gains loads of it. So I think A tier sounds good, and it's nice to see this being filled up a little bit more. Maybe the next bird isn't going to go there, though. We'll see. It's the mistletoe bird. So this one, you have a choice. Interesting brown power. You can either gain a berry from the supply, or you discard a berry to gain a nectar. So that sounds good, but is it good, Tayro?
Does it sound good? I don't know.
Gaining nectar sounds good to me. I don't know about you.
Yeah, but again, you're investing 3 food.
Yeah.
It's again one of those birds that I just don't quite remember playing this. Like, in the most desperation, like, do I want to play this, or do I just rather just keep finding another forest bird? And it's giving a lot of Karimako like vibe. So I almost want to put it in F tier.
I definitely want to put it in F tier. I think it's certainly when we talked about the Karimako earlier, I think these are probably 2 of the birds that are fighting between each other for the worst brown power in the game. It's very strange one. Maybe if someone else has got the fruit dove and is giving out loads of berries, absolutely gain a nectar each time, go for it. But like you say, it's a really awkward food cost and only 3 points. It feels very weirdly balanced, and I don't quite understand this bird. And like you say, I don't think I've ever kept it at a starter candy either. So F tier, forget it. We'll move on. Next bird on the list, we've got the musk duck. So this is wetlands, brown power, similar to some others we've looked at before. Draw a face-up card from the tray with a ground nest or a star nest, and you may reset or fill the tray before doing so. Now, I think because it's so similar to the shell duck that we've already looked at, I'm inclined to just stick it alongside. Is there any reason to stop me from doing that, Tayro?
Not really. Yeah, I think it's more or less in the C tier, but maybe higher in the C tier just because of the 1 food cost, right? Like compared to goldfinch, like, maybe I would want to play the musk duck compared to the goldfinch for the potential to gain card, right? So
I can see that. I think I might put it next to the shell duck just because of the similarity, but have it that slightly higher up, because there are going to be some others that are of that sort of similar comparison that we will come to later on. But similar reasons to the shell duck. C tier feels right. Next bird on our list, New Holland honey eater. So this is another brown power. When activated, gain a nectar from the bird feeder if there is one. So again, gaining nectar, what could go wrong, Tayro?
Well, if there's no nectar in the feeder, then you gain nothing. Again, it's one of those power that you cannot consistently activate because you don't reset the feeder. Once you gain it, it might be gone, and then next time you won't get the nectar. And for 0 point, you really want to make sure you're getting your value back if you're committing to this. It's not a bird that I usually play. Like, I'm seeing it as a filler bird, not a bird that I'll build an engine around for sure. So maybe D tier.
I think D tier. I think it's I think, to be honest, to me it's probably the borderline of D and F, and I think what keeps it out of F is that it's not of that Karimako mistletoe bird level. It's kind of like that emu, like we talked about, when looking at that bird, which is that if it reset the feeder, it would be really good. You probably put it in C, maybe even B tier, maybe even A tier for the extra nectar. But you kind of need something to go with this bird to help reset the feeder and make sure that you're able to get the nectar. But in a 1v1, it's just so easy for your opponent to block this. You play this turn 1, they take all the nectar, and then you can't use it. So it's a bit of a waste. So D tier, I think, feels about right there. So we'll go to the next bit in the list, which is the Noisy Miner. So another brown power here. You tuck a card from your hand behind this bird, and if you do, lay up to 2 eggs, but then all other players may lay 1 egg. So yeah, this is a really interesting bird. I don't quite know where to put this. I'm maybe going to try and make a case that it goes in A tier. I think it is that very powerful bird that has a strong brown power, and anytime, we've not really had that come up too much in this tier list yet, but anytime you're gaining eggs outside of the grasslands in Oceania, it's exactly what you want at the start of the game. So I think it just has enough to go into A tier, but there are maybe some drawbacks. So I'm interested to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, disclaimer, this is one of my favorite birds.
Oh, there we go.
From Oceania. So
it's going in A tier then.
Yeah, I think it definitely has the criteria to go into A tier. I'm gonna go back to the feeling that if you have this in your starting hand, or you got it in early game, it's a bird that you're gonna build your game around it. You're gonna find a way to build around it just because how good it is. So
absolutely,
for me, that goes in A tier.
Yeah, I think you're right. It's such a good bird, and it's one that it does need a bit of support. I think maybe unlike something like the main duck, but it's kind of similar to the galah in that you can't just have a forest with just the Noisy Miner. You are going to need to add something to it, but you're also going to need the card access, right? You're going to need a good wetland bird that we've, some of these other ones that we've maybe already looked at that can get you extra cards to feed the Noisy Miner. And yeah, without that extra card access can be tricky, but good. I'm glad you like this bird, so I'm glad we can put it in A tier because I think definitely where it belongs. So good to see that.
S tier is still looking very empty.
S tier is looking empty. We'll see. We've still got plenty of birds to get through, so who knows? Who knows if we'll get a bird in there or not? We will see. It's a pretty high bar to meet that, supreme level. Supreme is a big word, so we will see. But for now, we'll talk about the next bird on our list, which is the North Island Brown Kiwi. So another bonus card power. We've looked at a few of these before. This one a bit different though. Discard a bonus card, and then if you do, draw 4 and keep 2, discarding the other 2. So yeah, is this kind of similar to those other bonus card powers we've already looked at?
Yeah, I think it's similar, but again, maybe not as good, or like I don't look forward to playing in early game just because of the investment of the food. And you might have to discard your bonus card, even if you have a good one that you want to keep. So yeah, I will put it there, but realistically, it's not a bird you want to play in early game.
No, I think you're right. It feels of this level of Kakapo, Abbotsby, Kia, where you might keep it in the starting hand, but you're certainly not going to play it. Maybe if you have Visionary Leader or something like that, you might play it, but there's no real reason to. And yeah, the high food cost, the high investment is off-putting. So I think D tier, for the similar reasons to these other birds, feels about right. So we'll go to the next bird on our list. Orange-footed scrubfowl. Game in power, you lay an egg on each of your birds with a ground nest, including this one. So identical power to the malleefowl. Is it going to go in the identical spot? I think probably. It's that very similar. There's maybe a case you could make that it fills the sort of cheap filler bird criteria, but even then, would I rather play it compared to a goldfinch or a budgerigar? I think I probably wouldn't. And one habitat, am I okay to put it next to the malleefowl?
Yep, that sounds good.
I think that feels about right. So excellent stuff. We'll go to the next power. Well, the next bird, which is another game end power we've got here, the Pacific Black Duck. This one game end for every 2 eggs in your wetlands. Lay 1 egg on this bird. So bit of a weird one. Is this something you look for in the early game?
Definitely not a bird that you want to look to play in the early game, right? Definitely a desperation. Now I'm just looking at the potential return, say compared to the Cormorant. The Cormorant start with 4 points, right? And now you're only starting with 2 points, and you have to lay eggs to make sure you get the free eggs. Yeah, it's definitely worse than the Cormorant, but it's just a question of how much worse. Is it all the way to F worse?
I think it probably is. I mean, certainly if I compare it to something like this Black Swan, I'd rather take the Black Swan because you're getting points easily off that. You're definitely getting 1 egg, and it's already 6 points, right? Like you say, the Pacific Black Duck only 2, and I don't know if I've ever been able to successfully use this power and actually get that many eggs from it at the end of the game anyway. So I think even for its late game utility, it's kind of borderline. So I think F tier, forget it. That feels about right to me. So there you go, Pacific Black Duck. We'll go to the next bird in the list. Got the Peaceful Dove. So this one, when activated, discard any number of seeds and lay an egg on this bird for each discarded seed. Now, kind of similar to how we talked about with the Noisy Miner, getting eggs outside the grasslands, super useful, super powerful. I think I'm gonna make a case for it to go in A tier. I think it is of that level of, getting that bird in the starting hand, getting it down. It can start a really good engine for the same reason we talked about with the Miner, with the Galar, with the main duck. You can really build something strong here, and yes, it needs extra infrastructure around it. Yes, you need the support to make it work, but getting those eggs is so important, so valuable. So I'd like to put it in A tier. What do you think?
Yeah, no question, no objection. A tier, here it goes.
Excellent. All right, Peaceful Dove. Making some friends up here. I might put it maybe, where do we think? Below the Noisy Miner, but above the Lapwing? Or below the Lapwing?
I mean, I think it's about the same as Lapwing, so yeah,
I think
either way.
That feels about right. We'll put it between those two. So very nice power. We'll move to the next bird on our list, which is the Pesket's Parrot. So this is kind of similar to one we've already looked at. I cannot remember what the name of that bird is. It the Kareru, I think? Anyway.
Yeah, the Kareru.
Yeah, so this was when activated, but this one is when the player to your right has a nectar in their personal supply, you gain 1 from the general supply. So am I right to put it alongside the Kareru? It's basically the same power, but you're looking a different way. So for the same reasons as that, it's got all the same pros and cons and drawbacks and everything. So yeah.
No objection.
No objection. We'll put it there. So next bird on the list, we've got a pink power. It's the Pheasant Kukul. So this one, when another player lays eggs, you lay 1 egg on this bird. So we've already looked at kind of similar pink egg laying power. Is it going to go in a similar place? I don't know. We've got the Bronze Cuckoo and Beat It. I think the Kukul is probably a bit worse. I think I'd probably look to put this in C tier. The food cost is a little bit more. It can only go in the grasslands. I know you like your pink power, so I'm sure you'll make a case for this one, but I think it's a risky one.
I mean, the fact that you don't need another bird, though, you can lay eggs on the same bird, which just not guarantee, but make it more likely you gain the free eggs. I do see the points that, you start with 1 point for 2 food, but if you can even just get 1 or 2 free eggs in early game, is such a huge game booster. I don't see any worse than what's the other bird?
The Bronze Cuckoo.
Yeah, I don't think it's worse than the Cuckoo. It has to be at least in the B tier.
Yeah, it's tricky because I think in some ways it is better. Like you say, it's self-sufficient, and that's definitely a pro. But it's that lack of flexibility in where you can put it, and it's the extra cost. And I don't know. I feel like I've had so many situations playing a pink power and thinking, I'm going to get some free eggs. But if your opponent can work around that and really delay when they're going to lay eggs and kind of work around that, and like I say, maybe they're going to find a Peaceful Dove or a Noisy Miner, and then you're never going to get any usage. So I think I would always, proceed with caution with these kinds of pink powers. But okay, we can put it alongside that Bronze Cuckoo because it does fulfill that sort of similar niche.
I must say it also fit into the criteria of being better in multiplayer. Yeah,
it is. I think a lot of these pink powers, it kind of goes without saying that, the more players you have, the more activations you're going to look to get. And I think certainly with something where you're relying on someone laying eggs, if you have a 4 or 5 player game, someone's going to go for a Grasslands engine, you would think, or is going to lay eggs pretty regularly. So that definitely helps out. But I still proceed with caution with these, especially with the 2 food investment. Make sure you've kind of got some other food access or some other production going before you spend everything on this and literally put all your eggs in one basket. But it can work out in some situations. So beat it for the kukul, we will go next on the list to the pink-eared duck. So I think we've already ranked an identical bird to this, but this one is when activated, draw 2 birds, or draw 2 cards from the deck, keep 1, and give 1 to another player. Now I'm going to be testing myself to try and remember. I think, is it the shoveler or is it the pygmy goose?
Yes.
It's the pygmy goose that we've already ranked that is the same power. So I think hopefully uncontroversial to put them alongside one another. So we'll go to the next one on our list, which is Plains Wanderer. So bonus card bird. This one, draw 1 bonus card for each bird in your grasslands. Keep 1 and discard the rest. So can we make a case for this to go in our bonus card section of the tier list for the same reasons as all the others, or is there any reason to put this elsewhere?
Yeah, I think that's as best where it can go. So I'm happy to just put it there just to get over with.
Yeah, I think for all the same reasons, it's one that you might keep early and might play later, but you're probably not gonna play it early. And in this case, it's a power that you actually want more birds in your grasslands, right, to get more benefit off it, and you're not going to have that in the early game, so definitely makes sense to hold off. So into the bonus card section of D tier, we'll go to the next bird on our list. We've got another brown power coming up. This is Princess Stephanie's Astrapia. This is choose another player and you both lay an egg. So sounds promising. Eggs in the forest. Where is this going to go on the tier list though?
Right. 8 in the forest, great, but you are giving to your opponent an egg, bad in my book.
Yeah.
So is it better in multiplayer because then you get to choose who you give the eggs to? So I think it's beneficial, but I don't think it quite make it to A tier.
Yeah, I think this is a pretty standard B tier bird. I think in a 1v1, I play this in a pinch. I'm not really sure I look to it that much in a starting hand because of that risk, like you say, of giving eggs away to your opponent. It sounds like a Pleated Woodpecker, but it's just not as good because you're only getting that 1 egg. So it's similar to that Australasian Shoveler Brolga situation where when you're picking who's benefiting, in a multiplayer, much better. So I think in that area of B tier is a good fit for the Princess Stephanie. So we'll go to the next bit on our list, which is Pukeko. So another egg generator here. We got in the wetlands this time, lay 1 egg on an adjacent bird. So again, as with some of these other birds we've looked at, I think getting eggs outside the grasslands is really strong and tricky. I found this one quite tricky. Maybe it goes in A tier, maybe it goes in B tier. It's sort of on the borderline for me, so I'm hoping maybe you can sway me.
Okay. Well, right, if you think about this, if you get Pukeko in the early game, it's something that you might try to build around it just so that you can get that free eggs. But at the same time, it's kind of expensive and, wetland, like you might activate a few more time in round 1, but if you don't have other engine bird, it's not going to work. So I don't know. I just don't feel like it make it quite into A tier. It's more like definitely high B tier because of getting eggs in the wetland.
Yeah, I think you're right there. It's, if I look at these other A tier birds, is it on that level? I think probably not. I think it really, even more so than a lot of these, it needs, literally to use the power, it needs another bird, right? You've got to lay it somewhere else. So you can't just play this on its own. It needs to be, your second wetland bird, or you need something in the grasses anyway. So that does make it a little bit trickier, but I'd still, in a lot of situations, look to go for this in the wetland. So I think upper end of B tier, maybe we'll put it next to the Shrike Thrush. I think it is that sort of high B tier level bird. So very nice for the Pukeko to go up there. We'll go to the next bird on our list, which is the Rainbow Lorikeet. So this is brown power in the forest. Discard a nectar to the spent nectar space for your forest. But then if you do, you gain 2 food from the bird feeder. So food gaining brown power, is it too good to be true, or does this go straight up into one of the top tiers?
Yeah, Usually this bird work out pretty well. Basically, you're kind of netting one extra food. I guess the main benefit is when you discard the nectar, it does help with the nectar race for the forest.
Yeah.
And being able to kind of re-roll the feeder and just get more flexibility in the food that you gain. Yeah, it's somewhere between A and B. I'm not feeling strongly about A, maybe in the B tier.
See, I think it could be made a case that it goes in the A tier. I think certainly.
Okay, let's hear.
If I look at Shrike Thrush, Many-Coloured Fruit Dove,
Yeah.
it's that sort of cheap. Oh, it's obviously it costs 2 food and you're spending your nectar. So there are situations where this won't work in the early game if there's no nectar in the feeder. You have to spend your nectar to play it, and then you actually can't use the power when you're gaining food, and that is an obvious drawback. But I think if we put that to one side and we assume we're in a situation where you can play it and you can use it, you're gaining extra food. You're basically guaranteeing yourself the nectar points in the forest. I don't think I've ever seen this bird played in the early game and then that person lose the forest nectar. So, that's 5 extra points you've just gained just off this bird. So, yeah, I think in terms of the early game utility, being able to keep the bird feeder re-rolling and getting more nectar is so strong. So I would like it to go in the bottom of A tier, but what do you think about that?
I'm convinced.
Excellent.
I'm convinced.
That is what I like to hear. Yeah. So we
I
need
mean, usually
more birds up here.
Yeah. I mean, to be fair, like usually it feels pretty good if you start with the lorikeet.
Exactly.
So.
Yeah. And if I'm thinking of that always great, 90%, 95% of the time I'm going to keep it in a starting hand, that for lorikeet feels about right. So A tier, looking much better. Now we'll go to the next bird on our list. Maybe not quite such a good bird, unfortunately. Red wattle bird. So when played, gain a nectar from the supply for each bird with a wingspan less than 49 centimeters in your forest. So a very specific power. You could gain a lot of nectar with this, but in the early game you are not going to. So I think for me this has to go in F tier. I don't think there's really any question about it. I don't think I've ever kept this in a starting hand. So can I just put this maybe even just near the bottom of F tier, maybe next to the Magpie?
I would put it like at the absolute bottom. Excellent. To be honest,
I'm on board with that. That works for me.
The only question that I have is like, is this another card that they missed when they balanced the birds? It's like they just skip over this. Like, what happened here?
I do wonder if maybe the power could be a little bit more generous, a little bit more flexible. If it was even just game 1 for each bird in your forest, but the fact that they need to be small birds as well. Even in the late game, not including the one. Yeah, even in the late game, I find this so difficult to get any usage out of, and forget about it in the early game. So F tier for you, wattle bird. So we'll go on to the next bird on our list. This one is the red-backed fairy wren. This is a game end power. Lay 1 on each of your birds with a star nest, including this one. So feels kind of similar to some of these other game end powers. Where do you think this goes on the tier list, Tere?
Yeah, I'm looking at the end of D tier where you're getting bonus card, you're getting additional points, but not much utility otherwise. So
yeah, I think that feels about right. It's that kind of maybe you can get it in your grasslands and maybe you can get some extra eggs, but I think it's probably a weaker power, for example, than the Malafaux. It's of this sort of level, but it's so rarely a bird. It's to be honest almost an F tier, but maybe just enough to keep it out where you could get some benefit from having that grassland bird out. So into the lower ends of D tier for you. We'll go to the next bird on our list. Now this is the red-capped robin coming up. So this is a brown power. If the player to your left has a worm in their personal supply, gain 1 worm from the general supply. So in theory, this sounds like it could be top-end forest bird, gaining extra food. But I think, like some of these other ones we've looked at, it's just so easy to block this. And really, I class this as a desperation play. I think it's not even in that cheap filler category. So I'd look to put it in D tier. To be honest, in most situations, I don't think I'd go near this in a starting hand. I think I'd rather dig and try and find something better. So Yeah,
Okay.
where do you think? Where would you look to put this?
I would like to look at it. How does it compare to the fruit dove and maybe even the strike, right? They're very similar in terms of like food to points, and you're gaining extra food.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's got the drawbacks. It's got the same drawbacks as the Carrera and the Parrot in that you
Okay.
need another player to have a certain resource. And to be honest, with worms, I feel like that's even less likely than nectar because it's, who in Oceania is going for worms and not nectar. So for me, it kind of has the drawbacks of these birds, but even fewer benefits. So yeah, I'd bump it below. But are you thinking C tier or are you thinking D tier?
I think I would like to advocate it to be C tier just for the filler value, because I'm looking at D tier, like a lot of them are like expensive to play, right? And but at least one worm, like, okay, it's fine. I'll just invest one worm to get my forest going.
It certainly does feel a little bit better than maybe a cockatiel, where you could at least get some benefit, and situationally, if you can get this down where your opponent has got some worms, then maybe. But yeah, tricky one, and not really one to rely too much on. So into the bottom of C tier. For the Robin, we'll go to the next bird, which kind of similar power here. We've got the red-necked avocet. So this one is, if the player to your left or right has a worm in their supply, you gain a worm. Big difference here, though. This goes in the wetlands. So does that mean a different tier, perhaps, for the avocet?
Yeah, I think the biggest difference here is, gaining worm in the wetland potentially. And so I think it has to be at least better than the Robin. So maybe still in the C tier, potentially in the B tier, because it does go left and right. So in the multiplayer,
absolutely,
right, it's easier to trigger this. So, yeah.
I think it fills that better in multiplayer criteria quite well, where it is that sort of, you at least get a couple of options. In 1v1. If one player is not gaining worms, then you're stuck. Whereas at least in a 3-player, 4-player game, you've got 2 options, you've got 2 choices, 2 chances. So slightly better there. And yeah, I mean, this is situational. There are certainly situations where this can work really well, others where it's not so good. But I think in general, food in the wetlands is pretty good. So B tier, I think, sounds right for the avocet. So we'll go to the next bird. On our list, we've got the red-winged parrot here. So this one, very interesting power. You're giving away nectar to another player. And then if you do, you can choose either to lay 2 eggs on the parrot or gain 2 food from the bird feeder. So this is one that I think, again, fills that criteria of better in multiplayer. I think 3-player, 4-player, 5-player, this is amazing. I look to keep this in almost every starting hand in those situations. In a 1v1, again, like we talked about with some of the other powers, do I want to give away nectar to my opponent? Absolutely not. In no circumstances do I want to do that. So it has that pro of gaining eggs in the forest, which I think can put it maybe higher up in B tier, but I think it's got to stay in B tier just purely for the nectar drawback. So does that sound good? Are you going to make a case for it to go elsewhere?
Yeah, I think B tier is fine. For me, it's somewhere around B or C tier. I don't play this a lot.
Yeah.
And because it costs 3 food in the early game, like, you always want to make it work, but it's kind of hard because, like, if you think about it, if you want to play in wetland, you spend the nectar, and then you somehow have to find a way to gain nectar to activate it. So it can be tricky.
Yeah, I think it's sort of deceptively flexible because it looks like put it in any habitat, but really I've only had success with this in the forest where you can gain the nectar to use it, but kind of similar to the lorikeet that we talked about. If you've played your nectar on that turn to play this bird and then there's none in the feeder, you can easily get stuck. So a tricky one situationally. Yes, it can work. Like I say, much better in a multiplayer. So B tier feels good there. So we'll go to the next bird on the list. We've got the Regent Bowerbird. This is another brown power. And this one is, when activated, you get to choose another player and you both gain a worm. So we've had a few kind of similar powers to this, where you're sort of choosing someone else and you're both gaining food. So Is it going to go in those same sort of tiers? I think we're looking at maybe a C or a D. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, I think it's somewhere around there. I feel like we have another bird, right, that has very similar power, but I forgot what. Oh, the chat? No, not the chat.
We had the whitbird where
Yeah, the whitbird. That's what I'm thinking.
you're gaining
the whitbird.
seeds. Yeah,
Yeah, definitely the whitbird vibe there.
I think so. I mean, this has maybe the slight additional benefit of being able to gain food in the grasslands. And, you know, if we're looking at a baseboard game, that's obviously a pro, and you would look to bump this up a little bit. But yeah, I think just in Oceania, where Grasslands Engine's not really that prevalent, and you want something in the forest to gain nectar, spend nectar. You're not going to rely on this as your only food source. So it can work in a pinch, similar to that whitbird. So I think that makes sense. So we'll go to the next bird on the list, Rural Spoonbill. We've looked at a couple like this. I'll go through the power. Draw a face-up card from the trait with a platform nest or a star nest, and you may reset or refill the trait before doing so. So I think I should be okay to put this alongside the shoveler and... Is it the shoveler? Which one am I thinking of?
It's actually
the shell duck.
The shell
there we
duck,
go.
yeah.
The musk duck, the shell duck, and the spoonbill. So these are all similar powers. Hopefully non-controversial to put it there. So we'll go straight on to our next bird. We've got the Rufous Night Heron, so another wetland power here. This one, Predator. Look at a card from the deck. If it can live in the wetlands, tuck it behind this bird. If not, discard it. So yeah, how do you feel about this Predator power? Where do you think it belongs?
Very lackluster, and again, one of those like forgettable birds that like don't remember the last time I played this.
Yeah,
it just worked in the pinch as a wetland bird, so maybe in the D tier.
Yeah, I think D tier feels about right. Like you, I was trying to rack my brains as to when I even last played this, but also when I last kept it in a starting hand. Very, very rarely, very situational, like that true desperation scenario. So yeah, I mean, how would you compare it maybe to like the penguin? Do you think it's better or worse than the penguin and the noddy?
I mean, personally, I played the night heron before the penguin in the early game. But again, I don't want to.
Well, for you, I'll put it next to the penguin, slightly above. It has got that slightly cheaper food cost, so early on, absolutely better. But yeah, the penguin, that power is gonna do more than the night herons over a game. So yeah, not a great bird. D tier feels right there. So we'll go to the next bird on our list, which got another predator power coming at this one, the Rufous Owl. In the forest, when activated, draw a face-up card from the tray with a wingspan less than 75 centimeters and tuck it behind this bird. So yeah, kind of an interesting one. Kind of, potentially a nice brown power. You're guaranteed or almost guaranteed a point. Not always. But very strong chance of being able to get a point. But 3 rats in the food cost, very off-putting, very tricky. I think probably it goes alongside the noddy for that kind of similar reason of the expensive high food cost. So does top end of D tier sound about right? Oh, that's the wrong bird. We get the owl. Is that all right next to the noddy?
Yeah, I think it's definitely in D tier. I wouldn't even put it in high D. Just compared to other brown power, like, Cuckoo or Rosella, where you can gain food that can be useful. But, if you want to put it next to Noddy, it's fine. But I don't think it's that great.
No, I think, I think you're probably right. I mean, I think I like probably these birds more because they are wetland birds. And I think you generally want those a little bit more in the early game anyway. But yeah, Rufous Owl, it's not great. It's expensive. And again, kind of like some of these other birds, once you've got your engine going, maybe you could think about picking this up and playing it, but in a starting hand, very tricky to work with. So we'll leave it there in sort of middle of D tier, and we'll go to the next bird on our list, which is the Rufous Banded Honey Eater. So this one is, when activated, you discard a worm, but if you do, you gain a nectar. So you're potentially getting some nectar, but is it too good to be true?
Yeah. Again, tricky to make it work, because if you think about it, right, if you play in the wetland, you either spam a worm or a nectar, so you're not really like netting additional food or netting additional nectar. and it's a 0 point bird. Like it's just a bird that you never feel good when you play it.
Yeah.
And is it one of those like you'd rather not play a wetland bird? That's your only option. I don't know. Yeah, it's up to personal taste.
It is. It's tricky. I mean, I think it gives me strong Koromako vibes where you're sort of discarding some food. I think it probably is better than that, but yeah, it just doesn't feel great. I mean, at least, you know, worms are more likely to be able to be gained from the feeder, and maybe, you know, we've even looked at some of these powers here, which, you know, all players are gaining worms or some other players are gaining worms, and you can use that as a benefit. But I don't think I've ever kept this in a starting hand. I don't think I've ever played this really that early on, so I think this feels like a desperation sort of, you know, lower end of D tier. Does that feel about right? We'll
I mean, put it together with the honey bee eater, you know, just so that they can be together.
There we go, New Holland honey eater. So we'll put the honey eaters together, like you say, at the bottom end of D tier. So that sounds good to me. We'll go on to the next bird on our list. We have got Sacred Kingfishers. This is a pink power. When another player takes the game food action, you gain a worm, a fish, or a rat from the bird feeder if there is one. So yeah, gaining some extra food. We've already kind of looked at a similar bird to this, if I can find it, the nightjar, but I think this is definitely better than that, in that you're gaining different kinds of food. I don't know if it's necessarily better enough to bump it up a tier, but I would certainly say it's upper end of B tier. So what do you think about that? Yeah, upper end. It's definitely got that flexibility of the food cost on the habitat, of course, as well. And I mean, the food that you're gaining, if you think about when people are resetting the bird feeder and taking food, you're going to be taking nectars, and what's the dice that doesn't have nectar on it? It's worm, fish, and rat. So there's almost always going to be one left over. You're going to get some activation. So I think that sounds about right there. So next bird on the list, we've got the Silver Eye. So this is a brown power. When activated, all players gain 1 nectar from the supply. Now, I know how you feel about giving away nectar, Tay-Ray, so where are you going to put the Silver Eye?
Yeah, I mean, this is a tricky one. This is like the hummingbird of Oceania, right? Everyone get a food, and you can play in any habitat. I do feel slightly better about this just because for the flexibility that you get, right? You can build in the grassland, you can build in the wetland, or even in the forest, right? And you get to control the timing when you activate this. So, yeah, I think, can it be a B tier birds? Or like, somewhere between B and C for me. I guess.
I think it probably just about has enough to go into B. I think.
Okay.
Like you say, it's if I look at some of these other sort of giving away food birds where we've got, you know, they're giving away worms or seeds or berries, not great, but nectar. And like you say, I think being able to control the flow of the nectar is useful. And certainly being able to put this potentially in the wetlands, gain some cards, get a bit of nectar at the same time. There's obviously some good strength there. So probably that bottom end, maybe I'll put it at the bottom of B tier. Because it's not really, you can't just rely on this as your only food source. You're going to need to find something else, but, you know, is that a bit of a tempo play to get things going? I think certainly that makes sense. So we'll put you there. Silver Eye, we'll go to the next bird on our list, which is the South Island Robin. So when activated, this one, if the player to your right has a worm in their supply, cash 1 worm from the general supply on this bird. So really quite similar to one we've already looked at. If I can find it somewhere on this list.
It's the Robin.
Right?
It's the bottom of C tier.
Too many birds. There we go. Red Cap Robin. So yeah, it's kind of similar to this. Obviously, it's looking a different direction, and you're caching versus gaining with the Robin, but that feels like a bit of much of a muchness. It's kind of, they do more or less the same thing. Would you still put it in C tier, or do you think because it's caching, not gaining, that it bumps it down a tier?
I think it's more of a D tier for me. Like it's more or less a filler bird because you don't gain food. So
I think that sounds about right. I mean, I might put it alongside maybe like the cockatiel, where it's that kind of you know, you're sometimes gaining points from it, but there's no guarantee, and you're using it for that sort of filler capacity. So that Sounds good for the robin. We'll go to our next bird. We're getting close to the end here, but we've got a few more to work through. Next up is the southern cassowary. So this is definitely an interesting power. When played, discard a bird from your forest and put this bird in its place, but you don't pay an egg cost. And if you do play this bird, you lay 4 eggs on it and gain 2 berries. So lots going on here. How do you even begin to rate this for its early game usefulness?
Right. I mean, the first thing that jump out is like you potentially can gain 4 eggs in early game without laying eggs, which can really accelerate the game. I don't know. It might just be my lack of experience. Like I just never have the opportunity to kind of build my round 1 around this to make it work. So I guess I don't know. I think based on the potential, it should be really high, but I just don't have a lot of experience where I actually execute that strategy to make it work in real game.
Yeah. I think this one's so tricky because, you know, on the surface you're discarding a bird, which is like the last thing you want to do in the early game, right? You know, you want to be playing brown powers, you want to be building up a bit of an engine, getting some resources going. And so the idea of discarding one of those and then not being able to use it for the rest of the game, it feels like a big waste. But there are definitely situations where I've had early cassowary, played that round 1. Just the influx of eggs is really useful. So yeah, I don't know. I think I've got this sort of somewhere in C tier as a kind of I don't really know where this goes because it's just so situational. It so depends. You know, in the right situation, it could be amazing and it could go up in A tier or B tier, but in a lot of situations, it's just going to be way too expensive to get any usage out of. So yeah, it's a tricky one. This one, I really don't know where to put it.
I think C tier sounds about right. Like definitely not D tier. But yeah, it has to be a really strong case to make it into B tier. So
yeah,
I think C tier sounds fine.
Okay, I think that sounds good. We'll put it in C. But yeah, definitely a tricky one to work with. So watch out.
Again, it's one of those like you have to play the game to understand. Like you just don't always run into the right combination of bird or situation to make it work. But on paper, it sounds very good.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. So worth bearing that in mind with the cassowary. We'll go to the next bird on our list here. We have got Spangled Drongo. So this is a pink power. When another player gains nectar, gain a nectar from the supply. So free nectar sounds amazing. But there's maybe some drawbacks. So I'm going to say that this, again, with a lot of other birds we've looked at, fulfills that better in multiplayer scenario. I don't know, however, if it is even really a B tier bird in a 1v1 game because it's so expensive, 3 food straight away, and I feel like it's quite easy to defend against. I feel like if I play this, if my opponent knows what they're doing, they're just not going to take nectar, and I'm not going to get anything out of this, and it makes for a very painful experience, spending all my food, losing all my tempo. So I don't know. I feel like it's got to be somewhere between B and C, but I want to hear what you've got to think.
Wow. Are you trying to put out another hot take here? Trying to put Drongo in C tier?
I don't think this is that out of take. Like I say, if we're talking about 5-player game, this goes straight into S tier, no questions. But 1v1, I'm not playing Drongo in most situations there.
Interesting. I just feel like it's just so dreadful when your opponent plays a Drongo, and I get it, right? You can play around Drongo by not picking up nectar, but you're just at the same time putting so much pressure on your opponent to kind of react to it. They have to kind of, change their plan a lot, like, on how they execute their round 1. So I don't know. I feel like definitely not C tier. Let's not start a fire here. My feeling is, it go into A tier is like one of those birds you want to build around it or you want to play around it. But I can also see in high B.
I think B. I mean, I have got it in B tier. So I think I can make peace with that. It's just for me. It feels quite similar to these other pink powers where you can play this turn 1, and then your opponent plays main duck. And you just think, well, I've now spent all of my food and I'm not getting anything out of this. and it's a horrible situation to be in. So you kind of have to use this with caution, and I don't think you can rely on this as your only food source. You're going to need to add more to it. And yeah, like I say, for me, it is that better in multiplayer, where as soon as you get to 3-player, this probably becomes A tier, and then 4 or 5-player immediately into S tier, no question. But in that 1v1 scenario, I've had too many bad experiences playing Drongo and then just getting hurt with no food. So I think proceed with caution.
Yeah, I think that's totally fair. Another thing as well, right? Drongo also has a quite short window of play.
Absolutely.
Right? If you got into late round 1 or round 2, right?
Yeah.
In that case, you don't really need the nectar. The 1-point food is hard to justify. Yeah. So I think B tier is fine.
Okay. We'll leave it.
I mean, we might get
I might put it. I'll put it a little bit higher because I think it probably is better than some of these other pink powers. But it's just very, very tricky one to get right.
I feel like people are going to feel strongly about
there will be this, I think this is one of those birds, like penguin, like some of those other ones we've looked at, where there's going to be some strong opinions, and that's fine. So do let us know if you think we're completely wrong in the comments. But we'll move on for now to our next bird on the list. We've got Splendid Fairy Wren. So gain men power, lay 1 egg on each of your birds with a wingspan less than 30 centimeters, including this one. This feels kind of similar to some of these other yellow powers we've looked at. Is it going to go in F tier as well, Tay?
Yeah, more or less F tier. And 2 food investment, no.
Yeah. No thanks. 2 worms as well. So, if you're playing this turn 1, you've got to spend your nectar on it. Yeah. Do you really want to do that? Probably not. So it feels kind of similar in here. And it might be a similar story for our next bird, which is Spotless Crake. Again, another game in power, which lays eggs. This one you're laying 1 egg on each bird in your wetlands, including this one. So quite straightforward, but I think probably it's got to go maybe slightly better than the black duck. Do you think it's higher because it's cheap?
Yeah, I mean, look at what is above it, right? We have the Comran at the Scrub Fowl. Yeah. They're very, very similar.
That's true, actually. This maybe is more of this is maybe more of a cormorant. Maybe slightly, I don't know, maybe slightly on par. We'll put it in that same area, but I think because of the 1 food, maybe I think that does feel more right. But again, desperate play if you need something for the wetlands. Otherwise, look away and go for something else. So we'll go to the next bit on our list. We've got Stubble Quail. Okay. So interesting one, this one. When played, discard up to 6 food and lay 1 egg on this bird for each discarded food. So potentially lots of eggs, and we want eggs in the early games. So is that going high on our tier list?
Yeah. I mean, for me, I'm debating between A tier. Definitely not supreme, but A tier. Yeah. It's kind of have the feel of like Lapwing, right? You just gain a bunch of eggs. And then it's a card that if you gain it in the starting hand, you will try to work and make it work. So
yeah, I think absolutely that. The situations where I've had so much success with Stubble Quail is where you have a bird like the fruit dove, like these some of these other forest birds we've looked at that are gaining extra food, and you can just gain food a few turns. You're cycling the feeder, you're gaining some extra nectar, and then you play the Stubble Quail. You get 6 eggs. That just saves so many turns going into the end of round 1, and even throughout round 2. You can basically get away without laying eggs for so long, and it's hard to put a value on that, but absolutely A tier. It's I would need another egg source in my starting hand to not go for this bird, and I think if I don't have an egg source and I have a food source, Stubble Quail is excellent, and I'm going to go for that. So
absolutely.
A tier. Finally, we're filling up a row here, so that is good. We've got some good birds in this expansion, which is nice to know. So we'll go to the next bird on our list. We've got the Sulphur Crested Cockatoo. So this one is a brown power. Kind of similar to another cockatoo that we've already looked at. But this one, tuck a card from your hand behind this bird, and if you do, all players gain nectar. So yeah, similar to this Major Mitchell's. Do you think it goes in a similar place? I feel like it probably does. I kind of find it quite tricky to differentiate between the two. I mean, giving away nectar, but you're still gaining nectar. I don't know if it's better or worse, but they feel quite similar to me. I don't know how you feel.
I think Yeah, more or less. I don't have strong feeling about it being in D tier.
All right, we'll put the cockatoos together because, yeah, they do fill the similar sort of niche. So we'll swiftly move on to the next bird on our list. We've got the superb lyrebird. So this one is a very interesting power. When activated, copy a brown power on one bird in the forest of the player to your right. So super situational. How do you even begin to put this bird on a tier list?
Yeah. It's super tricky. Just one of those like, okay, if your opponent has like a wood duck or egg-laying birds in the forest,
absolutely,
it can make your life like so much better. But there's also a lot of situation like it come up with your starting hand. You know, it's really a difficult question to ask yourself. Like, do you keep it because you don't know what bird is gonna be play? So I don't know. It's not high on my list, so I'm interested to hear what you think.
Yeah, I mean, I think like quite a few other birds, it's so difficult to know where to put it because it's so situational. You know, like you're saying, if there's a wood duck or a chipping sparrow or an American robin or something goes down, and you know you can copy a strong power, you know this is up there in A tier, no question. But you just don't know. You don't have that information necessarily in your starting hand. This is really one that you have to find it sort of in the late round 1, early round 2 scenario where you can already see what your opponent is starting to develop in their forest. And then you can make that decision, do I play this or not? Trying to make that in a starting hand is next to impossible. So yeah, I think I probably put this in C tier in the sort of it can work category. It doesn't feel like a desperation play. It feels more like it's just so situational, and yes, it can work, but you know, don't keep this bird unless you feel confident that you can use it to copy something useful, because it's just very tricky. So I'm just gonna put it slap bang in the middle of C tier because I don't even know what else to do with it. So
yeah, I agree.
Good, nice and easy for that one. Although a challenging power to think about. So we'll go on to the next bird on our list. We've got Tawny Frogmouth. So this one is a predator power. When activated, you reset the bird feeder and then cache a worm or a rat if there is one. So very strong predator power, very reliable hunter.
Yeah.
Has a lot of drawbacks though, and I think that's going to bring it down a few tiers. I don't know how many tiers. I mean, I think all else considered probably goes in B tier because it's that reliable hunter. Can fit in. Maybe I'd say it's better than a butcher bird or a brown falcon, but it's got a lot of drawbacks. It's expensive. You don't have to pull a shocked face. I'm going to put it lower down. Don't you worry. But yeah, do you think C tier next to the falcon, next to the butcher bird? Do you think lower?
I'm trying to consider whether it's lower in the D tier. I'm just trying to think, right? It's I mean, like as in D tier instead of C tier. Because it's a bird that doesn't generate you resources and it's a big investment, but you do get flexibility in habitat. Like, I guess I'm trying to see, is there any other bird I would play from the D tier rather than the frogmouth? Like, for example, I would play the heron instead of the frogmouth. Like, if I have 2 of those to keep, but this can go in the forest. So
it's true. I think I probably compare this maybe more closely with the butcher bird, where it's got that, it's quite similar food cost. You know, you can put it in any habitat as well. I think there is the drawback to the frogmouth that we do have to consider, which is obviously you're resetting the bird feeder and you're potentially revealing a bunch of nectar for your opponent. That can be a drawback that is, you know, something worth thinking about. But yeah, I don't know. It's in this similar area of, you know, you can build a bit of an engine around it, but it's not gaining you resources. It's expensive. So yeah, I think that's the sort of niche. Fine. That's the sort of niche it fills. So we'll put it alongside those other birds. We'll move on to our next bird, which is the tui. And the tui is almost identical to the lyrebird. It probably goes in the same place, but I'll read out the power. This one is copy a brown power on one bird in the forest of the player to your left. So basically the same as a lyrebird, but going the other way. I think for the same reasons. We'll just put it in the middle of C tier and not worry about having to scratch our heads on that one again. So yeah, tricky one to work with for sure, but can be very nice. So we'll go to the next bird on our list. We've got the wedge-tailed eagle. So we're getting some more predator powers coming up here at the end. This one is, when activated, look at a card from the deck, and if it has a wingspan over 65, tuck it behind this bird and cash one from the splite on this bird. If not, discard it. So similar to this sort of tuck and cash power we already looked at in the butcher bird. I think this is one, if the case was maybe to be made that Frogmouth was going in D-tier, I think this one probably does go in D-tier, just because that food cost is so expensive. It reminds me a lot of the Rufus Owl, to be honest. Maybe a bit better because of the flexible habitat, but 3 rodents is just so tricky at the start. So does that sound right in D-tier?
Yeah, I think probably like maybe high D tier, just because of the flexible habitat, compared to, say, the naughty, right?
Yeah.
I must say, like, wedge-tailed eagle is like, every time I get it, I always try to play it, and I always get hurt by it. So I have a very love-hate relationship with the eagle. But
yeah, I think this is quite similar to the penguin in that it's very polarizing, and some people love it, some people hate it. I think it's okay, but it's certainly I think it fits in this category of, maybe once you've got your engine going and you've got a bit of food production, fine, and you can afford these expensive birds, to maybe get a bit of an engine going. But yeah, 3 rats, like the noddy, like the penguin, like the Rufus Owl, those 3 identical food costs at the start, so difficult. So D tier, upper end, feels okay to me. We'll go to the next bird. We've got the Welcome Swallow. So this is a when played power, tuck a card from the deck behind each bird in this habitat, including this one. So early game, where do we think this goes, Tero?
Is it F tier? I'm trying to think about what's similar.
I think it probably is.
Right, that's a grassland bird that tuck cards. Did we put that in F tier?
So we've got the Australasian pipit, which is that game end power. So kind of similar, but like you say, you have to have the birds now to get the tucks on the swallow.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, kind of like we talked about with some of these other birds, like the Plains Wanderer, like when you have to have other birds down to use the power, you're just not going to have that in the early game. So I don't think I've ever kept this in a starting hand. I hopefully never will. And hopefully no one watching this ever will either. So forget it, into F tier for the Welcome Swallow. And we'll go to the next bird on the list. Another predator power coming up. This one, the White-bellied Sea Eagle. When activated, reset the bird feeder, gain a rat or a fish from the bird feeder, and then cash it on this bird. So pretty good hunting power, I gotta say. I quite like this hunting power. I think it's pretty successful. That said, very, very expensive. But does have a little bit more flexibility in food costs than, say, the wedge-tailed eagle. So does it feel in this sort of grey butcher bird, brown falcon territory? That sort of feels about right to me, but I don't know how you feel.
I think that sounds about right. Remind me where... because when I saw this bird, the first bird that it remind me of is the Rufus Owl. So it's interesting that we put the Rufus Owl in D tier. I guess because of the habitat. You get 2 habitats to choose from. So I can see it being better than the Rufus Owl, yes.
Yeah, and I think as well, like we said with the eagle, just these kind of 3 identical food birds that you either forcing down or you have to spend a turn taking food first is just so difficult. But at least, I have had situations where I've played the Sea Eagle turn 1 because you use your nectar and it can go in either the forest or the wetlands, which are exactly the habitats that you're looking to develop at the start of the game anyway. So to me, it like I say, it feels of that ilk of a sort of butcher bird frogmouth, where it's a bit expensive. You might start an engine. It's not going to get you any resources, but at least it's something to get you going, so it can work. So I think C tier in that region feels about right. We've really not got many birds left, so we'll move on to our next one, the white-breasted wood swallow. So this one is, when played, you lay 1 egg on each bird in your grasses, including this one. So is that similar to the Welcome Swallow? Is it a bit better? Where do you want to put this one, Tero?
Well, definitely better than the welcome swallow because you get eggs.
Mm-hmm.
That's premium.
Oh yeah.
It has some utility, but again, you're not gonna get a tons of eggs in
Mm.
early game, right? But at the same time, even just 1 or 2 eggs might be able to, accelerate your game a little. So, like somewhere between C and D, like does it have enough merit to go to C? Like, who do we compare it to?
Yes, yeah, it's so tricky because I don't think there is really a comparison, not in terms of Oceania birds. I mean, it reminds me a lot of birds like the Say's Phoebe and, those kind of birds from the base game, which I think actually can be really useful early on in Oceania. Like you say, just getting a bit of an influx of eggs. But it kind of feels maybe more useful as a sort of round 2 play where maybe you've got a couple of grass and birds down already and you play this and you get a few eggs. I wouldn't want to play this on its own, but certainly once I've got something going. So I feel like D tier maybe is where it goes. It is that sort of desperation play, and you probably don't keep it from a starting hand, but maybe you pick it up. I mean, certainly if I compare it to the Horsfield's Bushlark, I'd probably rather have the Wood Swallow, but maybe that's just me, and maybe that's not you. So we'll leave that. And we'll move on. We're very much near the end of this list. We've got 3 more birds. Next up is white-faced heron. So yet another predator power that we've got near the bottom of this list. This one, when activated, you reset the bird feeder and gain all the fish, if there are any, and then you may cache any or all of them on this bird. So kind of similar in a way to the black noddy.
But better.
Is it better enough to get it up a tier, Ray? I think it might be.
Yeah. I mean, look at other predator that we have, right?
It certainly feels more of this level. I mean, is there a case to be made actually that it's even better than, for example, the sea eagle, because you can keep the fish. It's got that pro of the noddy where you can keep the fish and maybe play some more birds, whereas obviously these powers you cache. So I think it's better than these. Is it good enough to go B tier, or is it just like a top end C tier bird? What do you think?
I think B is definitely a stretch. You do gain the fish, but you give away the flexibility of play it in other habitat. So I think C tier, I can live with that.
I think, to be honest, it feels quite similar to the ibis. I'd probably be maybe equally happy to have either of those. That's sort of that similar, quite expensive, but a good brown power that can help gain you extra resources. So and maybe convert into points as well in a late game engine. So they feel quite comparable. That feels reasonable to me. We'll come on to the next bird, and thought we'd got rid of all the controversial birds, but we've got one more left to do. The Willy Wagtail. So when activated, draw 1 face-up card from the tray with a cup or star nest. You may reset or refill the tray before doing so. Now, we've already looked at a few of these birds. We've already looked at, where are they? The shell duck, the spoonbill, the musk duck. But this is different. This is different, Willy Wagtail. Does it go in a different tier, Ray?
I mean, maybe it has to be going to a different tier just because of the habitat flexibility, right? You can play them in the forest and the grassland to gain card, but again, it's one of those power where once you play a few games with it, you realize like the power is actually very limiting because you don't always have card that you can pick up, and you refresh it, you might reveal card to your opponent, so it's a tricky one. So yeah, higher than those, but definitely not higher than B, I would say.
Yeah, I think it's definitely better than these, as you say, that flexibility, and it probably is better in those other 2 habitats. But I think this is certainly one of those birds where when I first saw it in Oceania, it reminded me so much of the wood duck, and I thought this is going to go straight into A tier. This is going to be one of the best birds in the expansion. Everyone's going to want to play this all the time. And then you have a couple of games with it, and you kind of realize maybe it's not all it's made up to be. Definitely some drawbacks, and kind of similar. I mean, what we've talked about birds where you can't rely on it as your only source of cards. This one, you're going to need a wetlands because you're going to be resetting the tray. You're not always going to get cup nests. Even if you do, you're not necessarily going to want to play them. So 100% you need extra stuff around it. So I probably would put it, I don't know, would I rather have this than the ibis? I mean, maybe it's kind of a toss-up depending on which way I want to go, but I don't know.
I mean, I feel like, do you not feel like it has at least some merit to go to B tier?
I mean, it could do. It's so tricky. If I think about like what's going in B tier, it's the birds that are maybe not quite good enough for A tier. Is that in that category? I don't know. It would certainly be lower end of B tier at most, but this is such a tricky one.
Yeah, it's very tricky. But again, like if it's one of those games where the tray just line up, like you play this in the forest, it can really work.
Yeah. And especially if you have a tucking bird, you know, if you've got a robin or something, this suddenly as a combo that goes into A and, you know, verging on S tier in terms of that usefulness in the forest. But yeah, on its own, like I say, you just can't fully rely on this as its own sort of source of cards in the forest. So I think bottom end of B tier is probably as far as I would go, but I don't know. I think like so many of the others, there's going to be people who disagree. You're welcome to. If you think Willy Wagtail is better or worse, do let us know. But we've got just one more bird left to do on this very, very long tier list, and it is the Rybill. So again, similar to so many other birds, it's a bonus card bird. But this one, you look through all of the discarded bonus cards and you keep one of them. Now, obviously, at the start of the game, you're not going to have that many discarded bonus cards. So we've got this kind of area of the tier list that's got all the bonus card birds. Does it go with those, or does it go even lower than those?
I think it go with the D tier, like the boobies and the Kia, more or less. Yeah.
I think it certainly feels in the sort of Kia, Kiwi, Plains Wanderer section where, you know, you really don't want to play that round one, but you might still keep it in a starting hand or pick it up early if you think you can afford to, and then look at playing it later on and really get the full benefit of that power, because it can be a really powerful bonus card bird, and, you know, find that late game or play it late game, you get great success from it. But yeah, early game, not really one you want to go for. So there we go. We're all out of birds. We have gone through all 95 birds in the Oceania expansion. So gotta say, quite spread out. We got a lot in D tier, it has to be said. Not too many in F, which is reassuring, but also not too many in A. We've only got 8 birds that we consider as being A tier, and nothing in S, which is quite interesting. You know, if I think back to when we did the base game tier list, we had those 4 birds, right? The killdeer, the gull, the 2 ravens, straight into S tier. Nothing quite on that level, in our opinion, in the Oceania expansion. So does that feel about right? Does that surprise you that we've not got anything in S tier?
I guess like not really, right? Because with the base game, we kind of established that a lot of the S tier birds are, you know, slightly overpowered. I think, with Oceania, there's a lot of good birds, but no birds feel overpowered. So, but I do feel like that, like in terms of proportion of A tier bird in base game, I remember there was at least 2 or 3 rows of A tier birds. That was really good. But we're not introducing as many from the Oceania.
No, I think that's interesting. I think it maybe says something a little bit about how games with Oceania and on the Oceania boards are just a little bit different, in that actually you're not always necessarily looking for those early game strong resource gainers, because actually the resources, certainly in terms of food and cards, are a little bit easier to get hold of anyway. And so a bird that gets you extra food is maybe inherently slightly less valuable than it would have been on the base boards. I think certainly if we were to go back and look at the base game tier list and the European expansion tier list with Oceania birds and Oceania boards in mind, there might be some movements there. So that's potentially something we could do in the future. If you guys watching want to see us do that, let us know in the comments. That could definitely be an interesting experiment to go through and do that again. But lots of birds, we've gone through lots here today, and that is our tier list. So Any final thoughts, Tay-Ray? That was quite a mammoth effort, but we've got a tier
Yep.
list. We've done it.
Yeah, I mean, like I say, I think people are gonna agree with this, disagree with some of this. I think, yeah, I'm looking forward to see, like, you know, what are people's thoughts on some of this bird. Yeah.
Absolutely. So yeah, do let us know your thoughts on the tier list in general. Is there any glaring omissions, any obvious things we've got wrong, anything that you do agree with us on some of our hot takes that we've had? Do let us know in the comments. But yeah, all that is left for me to say is thank you so much, Tay-Ray, for joining me on this tier list. It's been a lot of fun. I'm so glad that we have finally been able to get to do this and work our way through the Oceania birds. So yeah, and thank you everyone at home for watching along. As said at the start, we've done this before with the base game, with the European expansion over on Tay-Ray's channel, which is Tug and Cash, so you should go and check those videos out if you've not already seen them. If you have, they were a while ago, so maybe watch them again, refresh your memory, and compare some of the birds with the birds on this list. So yeah, thank you very much for watching, and I hope to see you again in another video very, very soon.